All your favorite Smodco shows aren't just available on audio anymore. All the best ones are now available as books. Podbooks.com. That's Podbooks with a Z. Transcribe directly from our Smarchives. Enjoy the Smonsters of Talk in print form. Kev, Ralph, Jay, Jen, Moj, and more. Just go to podbooks.com for more details. That's Podbook with a Z on the end. Podbooks. Pods in print. Smodcast is turning 6 years old, motherfucker, and we're celebrating with a smorgy. January 26th and 27th, get ready for 2 days of non-stop oral pleasure in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The Smodcoast Morning Show, I Sell Comics, Highlands of Peephole History, Smodcast, The Secret Stash, Hollywood Babylon, Fat Man on Batman, Babylon Comic-Con Theater, Plus One, Tell 'em Steve Dave, Jay and Silent Bob Get Old, and a smash-up jam session. The Smonsters of Talk invading the Spats Theater in Halifax, Nova Scotia, January 26th and 27th. Tickets just $99 for each day at smodcosmorgy.com. Don't miss the Smonsters of Talk as the Smods bring their pods to the Smorgy. Tickets available now at smodcosmorgy.com. Smodco's been blasting its own brand of fuck yeah for years in all forms of media. If you're saying,
hold up, sir, dude, what about video games?
We got that market covered too. Visit smarcade.com to learn about count 'em, two games for your iOS and Android device. Jay and Silent Bob grace your mobile with Too Fat to Fly and Let Us Dance. Get your game on, Smod Goblins. Check out smarcade.com.
Hi, I'd like to bring this meeting to order with a brief prayer of thanks to our Savior. Our Batman, who art in Gotham, cowled be thy mane. Now, y'all know Kev Smith's a big old fat man, but did you know his favorite hero is Batman, the Dark Knight who punches dirty turkeys in the face? That's right, Cape Crusader. Punch all those turkeys. Punch them in their turkey necks. So once a week now, this no-fly list fatty's gonna put the food down and get chatty about Batty, and this turkey gets wordy about Gotham like it's a real place. He ain't got time for his wife or daughter. This Catwoman's losing, Batman ain't caught her. Go get her, Cape Crusader, you want a pussy hunt now? Ha ha! Get ready, turkeys. We gon' bat shit. Babbling about the bat with old Kevin Smith. Now here's the fat man who loves Batman himself, Fat Kev Smith. Get on out here, turkey. Welcome to Fat Man on Batman. I'm Kevin Smith. There's a small hallmark over the course of my career that happened. You know, some of the benchmarks aren't massive and whatnot. They are, I guess, to the outside world, but internally, for yourself, you've got these weird little benchmarks. Dennis Miller, before he went oddly, extremely conservative, at least sounding as he has lately, back when he was just, Dennis Miller, who could really drop a fucking insanely labyrinthine pop culture reference, man, and make you giggle without fucking calling into question your politics and your sanity anymore. He had a show on HBO very similar to Bill Maher's Real Time. If you're watching Real Time now, Dennis Miller's HBO show was pretty much, I'm not going to say, it was the fucking template, but it was the forerunner, same kind of thing. They didn't have a panel of people. He would do that later on another show that he did, like a CNBC show, before he went staunchly conservative. It's 99, 2000. We're past Dogma at this point, and I go out to Los Angeles to work on the Clerks cartoon. So while I'm there, somebody over at Miramax is like, hey man, the Dennis Miller show wants to have you on as a guest. And I didn't really have anything to promote and stuff. And they were like, they don't care. He just wants to bring you on. So I get to go on the Dennis Miller show. I'm a big Dennis Miller fan, going back to SNL and whatnot. I didn't religiously watch the HBO show, but if I'm clicking around the channels it's on, I would kick back and watch. It was good. He would interview people. Then he'd do pictures and make comments and shit like that. It was a really good show. Like I said, very much like Bill Maher's Real Time, except no panel discussion. So there I am on the show. I don't really understand why. But I'm happy to be there. And when Dennis Miller pulls me out, or right before during his intro, and then he also communicated it while I sat down and he was doing the opening chit chat. He indicated the reason I was there was because there was such an insane outpouring of online or fan demand. Now, this is going back again to 99, 2000. When I sit down on the couch or the chair or whatever to talk to him, he says something like, "We've done 100 of these shows, and you're the person people most want to see, man. Congrats." The online world, the burgeoning online world, which I was spending a lot of time in, had given me a big old hug, and essentially they got me on that show. So it meant the world to me to hear that, and I tell that long, fucking, boring-ass story to get to this point, man. Our guest this week, from the moment Fat Man on Batman became a thing, at first it was a kind of threatened on a few podcasts. I joke about it on Hollywood Babylon, talk about it on Smodcast, maybe muse about it on Jay and Silent Bob Good. When I first recorded the first episode, Paul Dini, it started as an episode of Smodcast before it moved over to its own title, Fat Man on Batman #1. From the moment it happened, from the first, let's say it went out at like 9 o'clock in the morning, man, by the time you were done listening to episode 1, every tweet that came through the fucking transom was, "You have to get Scott Snyder on this show." And what I read when I dug into the New 52 Batman relaunch, issue #1, was an epic Batman story. This kid pulled out the Batman cock, and it was huge. Liam Neeson, huge, man. Like, not content to kind of like, we're restarting, man. I'll tell a fucking Joker story. I'll tell a Penguin story. I'll find a new spin for fucking the Riddler. Bullshit, man. He created a new mythology within the mythology we all know of the Batman universe, and told an epic tale that spanned 11 issues, almost 12 if you count kind of the Zero stuff. Scott Snyder, that everybody's like, you got to get him on the show, man, from day one, is doing the Lord's work in the current Batman continuity, man. Bringing something insanely fresh to a character we all love and we think we know backwards and forwards and whatnot. He found a way, and is continuing to find ways, to tell fucking stories that even I, as a writer, I'm like, didn't see that fucking coming, and have been gripped by. Man, I dare you to read one issue of Court of Owls, of the Court of Owls storyline, and just put it down and be like, I'm done. You will fucking be haunted by it, man. It's backed up by the visuals of, it was Greg Capullo. I never know how to pronounce his name. So that's all a long fucking intro and way of saying, this week on Fat Man on Batman in the Fat Cave, the writer of Batman, as well as many other things, American Vampire, Voodoo, what is it? Voodoo Heart? He literally tapped his heart. This is adorable. Scott Snyder, give it up for him, everybody. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I can't tell you what an honor it is. Yeah, I've listened since the very first episode with Paul, and I mean, it's really a thrill. So I can't thank you enough for. I've been like more excited than anyone to be able to be like, when can we do this?
He has. So Scott's really kept tabs on it. When people were saying like, do it. Finally hit him up on Twitter, going like, hey man, I'm going to be east, blah blah blah, and we try and make a play date, if you will. And we got fucked by Sandy last time, Hurricane Sandy. We didn't get fucked as bad as many others got fucked by Sandy, but our play date and first recording date kind of got put off by that. So, but Scott kept tabs on it and whatnot. I was coming back east for literally, I'm in New York for a span of, I think it's 12 hours by the time I get out of here. But we found a window where he was able to come in. Where'd you come in from?
Stony Brook from Long Island. So
that's a trek, man. It's no stone throw. He couldn't bike ride here. It involves cars or trains or some such shit like that. But he made the trek into the city, and here I am in New York, and this is our lucky room for Fat Man on Batman when we're not actually back west where I live. The Fat Cave, if you must know, is my house. When we're doing the show, satellite show, it's here at Argo Studios. Paul's so happy you got a plug, man. Right here in Manhattan, man. Excellent fucking rates. Beautiful place. That like classy places use this. Moth does it here. Don't they record here? Come on, podcasters. Moth record here. Good enough for you as well. Fantastic fucking rates. But this is a lucky room for us because last time we did Fat Man on Batman, it was Kevin Conroy in the chair.
I heard that one. That was great.
He was good.
Yeah.
Okay, but fuck all that, dude. It's about you tonight. This is your fucking life. You're born here in the city.
Yeah. I grew up not far from here, actually, in 23rd Street at Waterside,
And that's where you grew up?
Yeah.
But do you know where your hospital was? Like, were you born on the island?
Yeah, I was born right at NYU on First Avenue and 33rd Street.
You're a total city kid.
I know. I'm a second or third generation city kid too on both sides. So
and nobody wanted to get out. Nobody was like, "Let's go to the fucking Jersey burbs." Like, you're in Stony Brook now.
I know.
Are you the first generation who's just like, we're getting the fuck off this island? Dude.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Nicely done.
Yeah. We but no, I grew up here and nobody believes me. And they're always like, they think I grew up in the Midwest or something for some reason. But I grew up here and my local shop was.
I could see that. Honestly, you don't come. You're right, man. Now that you threw that stereotype out there, I was like, I could see people being like, he's got to be from Indiana.
I know, or a serial killer. I get that a lot too.
Oh, I didn't get that yet. But I guess from the work, there might be a few people going like, he thinks about some fucked up shit. But you don't throw off the city kid vibe. There's no like Harmony Korine about you. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing. I'm not saying like you're not fucking edgy. She's not throwing off that pretentious like fucking I own the world because I was born in New York, which is pretty much the attitude you get from most New Yorkers. Maybe that's just a New Jersey guy speaking.
No, thanks. I appreciate it. No, I grew up here, and then my wife, once we got married, she started to go to school at Stony Brook out there. So we moved out there about 8 years ago, and we've been there ever since. So we're officially non-New Yorkers anymore.
All right. So growing up here, though, we'll get to the schooling in a little bit, but what do you do as a city kid? Where do you play?
Well,
this is what I like about the fact that you grew up here. I was driving through fucking New York today to get to the hotel, and you're looking around, dude. And I literally said out loud to Megan, I was like, you know what, man? Look at how vast and massive this fucking city is. Look at this traffic at standstill. Everyone trying to get into the fucking tunnel. Batman could never happen. Like, there's no way. Think of how, look at this little section of the fucking city that's like congested. If a major crime went off, how then Ming was with us, Ming from Comic Book Men. He's like, but Spider-Man could work. And I was like, yes, of course, Spider-Man could work, but that requires science. Like, Batman could be real, but when you look at the city, you're like, it's just fucking impossible. Yeah. But you grew up here, man. So, which really has to inform your Gotham. When you read Court of Owls, it is very like the city is a character, and the things that you're writing about, I had never, at least in terms of when you write about Gotham, are things that I never thought about and could never pull out. And I think that has a lot to do with you having an urban vibe, even though a lot of people are like, he's fucking Midwest serial killer.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think the thing is for me, growing up here, I mean, the thing is, when I think about like what we did as kids, I get terrified for my own kids. Like, we used to play at Waterside. There was a big garage beneath our building, and we used to play hide and seek, and we used to hide under the cars all the time. And you just like go crawl under the car and be like, this is where I'm hiding. And someone would turn on the car, and you have to like fucking get out of there as fast as you could. Or we used to go to the arcades that we used to play games at, were like in Times Square when it was seedy, or at Penn Station. And everybody I knew got like flashed and all that kind of stuff. So there,
really, like, is that a part of like growing up?
Yeah, it's definitely like a ritual. Yeah.
So like, and then now when you're in the suburbs, if some motherfucker shows you his dick, like, it's a fucking major issue, and the school's called in and fucking counseling. I guess like here in Manhattan, it's not. You're dealing with kind of like the element of surprise at all times.
Yeah, I mean, it was strange in the way that there were a lot of things I took for granted that way. I think growing up that now having kids, I think, my God, I can't imagine raising my kids in the city. But the strange thing is, like, I'm so terrified of the suburbs too, where I'm so scared my kids are going to drive. You know what I mean? Like, I knew a lot of kids that had a lot of messed up things. Like, I always got knocked down or hit and my hat taken and all that kind of stuff, like stupid things like that. But you get so scared of the drunk driving, that it's like, half a dozen one way and 60 other.
Fascinating, dude. That's a city kid thing, because it's like driving.
Yeah, I'm terrified.
That's not privilege. It's a goddamn right. You must now have a license.
Yeah, not until I was 21.
The fuck out of here.
No, seriously. I didn't have...
Because you didn't need one.
No. I took the subway and all that everywhere. So I didn't learn to drive. I'm still very bad. I didn't learn how to drive until I was graduating college, really. So I always liked growing up in the city for the thing that you were saying with the court story. I mean, the thing that I always loved was just that sense of of how haunting it is. You know that you know the city and you know its history in some ways, like the facts of the history, but you can never know the lives that were lived there. And where we lived on the Lower East Side, and then farther down, we used to go to the South Street Seaport in kind of the older areas, you know, after school to go get fireworks and M80s and stupid shit like that. But going down there where it's so old.
And you're worried about driving.
I know, right? I definitely knew kids that like lost fingers and stuff, but I'm like, no way you're getting behind a wheel, but you can have this M80 to my 5-year-old.
Yeah, just throw it fast.
But the thing is that you definitely have a sense of that crushing history, that there were hundreds of lives lived in these areas before you were there. And one of the things about Gotham that's so interesting to me is that mystery of its own history, that it's ever changing, both because there are different writers on the books and there's no map of Gotham, but also because Bruce is he's so dependent on feeling like he knows the city better than anyone else. So that was really the inspiration for that story, was growing up in the city and feeling like, yeah, you know your neighborhood and you know where to go and where not to get mugged and that stuff. But at the same time, there is this kind of ghostly quality to the notion that you don't know a lot of people, that you don't know all the generations that lived there before you. And that was the key to that story, where it was like, well, Bruce thinks he knows the city, but what if there was a conspiracy from the past that he doesn't believe in for certain reasons that was true? That would really cripple him. So it definitely comes from a place of growing up here, I think that. And my notion of Gotham in general, it was the same in where I started on Batman was the Dick Grayson stuff and the Black Mirror and Detective, and it's similar. It's kind of
what is that? So that's what you did prior to the Batman run?
Yeah, what happened was I did American Vampire for
Vertigo.
For Vertigo, I had like an issue out, and then I went to Chicago to C2E2 Comic-Con. And I got this call. It was like, Dan Didio and Jeff Johns want to meet with you. And I was so nervous. I was like completely out of my head. What did I do? I know. I really was. I was like, they want to tell me it sucks. The series just is shit, and they want me to leave.
They don't do that in person, dude. You get an email maybe about that.
I didn't know. I thought they just wanted to berate me at the con, like in front of everybody at the panel.
Happy C2E2.
But I was so scared, and I got there, and I had this meeting on Saturday. I'll never forget. Like I went, if that year the C2E2 had a kitchen convention happening at the same time. And so it was all of this crazy like kitchenware extravaganza, where it was like people doing performance dances for kitchenware and all this stuff. And all I wanted was like, I was meeting with them at about 3, and I was like, you know what? I just want to have a beer, just something. Now, I'm not an alcoholic. Yeah, but I was like, just something to settle my nerves.
Let me put this out there. I'm a responsible drinker. Nothing wrong with drinking. Handle your fucking high.
Yes, to my 5-year-old.
So you're looking for a beer because you're about to meet some fucking bigwigs. For those that don't know, if you're remotely interested in the world of Batman, how dare you not know this? 2 gentlemen who will definitely be on the show sooner or later, Dan Didio, or Didio, depending on who you ask, and Jeff Johns, who'll be coming in the next few weeks. Talk about his Batman was Year One.
Earth One, yeah, that's great.
Year One's that other guy.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we'll get him one.
Who?
Yeah, I forget that guy's name. So in any event, these 2 cats are bigwigs. And Vertigo, if you don't follow comics that closely, because there are a lot of people who are like, I know the cartoon, fucking, I don't know from comics. Vertigo is DC's kind of alternative label. It came out of the work of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, and I guess by the time Neil Gaiman was doing Sandman, it had already fully formed. And I was there. I mean, I was in reading comics at that point, just when Vertigo was launched. You know, Animal Man was under that label. Swamp Thing eventually went under that label as well.
Hellblazer.
Blazer. You gotta be careful which one it was. They wanted to call it Hellraiser, but they couldn't because of the movie Hellblazer. John Constantine, that was under. Vertigo was doing kind of a darker, edgier, magic, supernatural, hardcore literary work. You know, and there's a bit of like if you ever follow the world of Apple and whatnot, battle between the Macintosh people and the fucking Lisa people or whatever. There was a very clear split between those that wrote superhero books and those that wrote for Vertigo. And in the early days, like a little bit of resentment from fucking fans and blah, blah, blah. And from what I understand, internally as well. But Vertigo gives a shit like The Sandman, gives a shit like Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol was a Vertigo book. And eventually they get to a place of essentially creator ownership, right? Like that's what American, your title was or is. Creator. Tell us about that real quick.
Yeah, well,
before we jump to your meeting.
Yeah, sure.
The book you're working on at Vertigo, you actually own.
Yes, I do. It's called American Vampire, and it essentially is a horror series that kind of follows a new bloodline of vampire that's born in the American West, and it's kind of like a new species that has different powers than the kind of Dracula vampire everybody knows, and it follows that bloodline through different decades of the 20th century. And that was a whole thing in terms of how I got into that, or was able to pitch that in the first place. I mean, my route into comics is something I would wish upon nobody in terms of like how circuitous and weird it was. But
we'll jump there. Let's jump back to. We'll keep you going on the current. We're going all many different universal tangential threads in DCU. But you're working on the Vertigo book. Issue 1 comes out. You got to meet with these two dudes.
Yeah, and I was crazy nervous, just completely out of my head, and basically, I was just like, I would just love to have one beer before I meet with them. I'm unabashedly just looking for a drink at C2E2, and there was nothing. There was nothing in the food court.
It's dry.
Yeah, it was dry. I don't know why, but they were like, someone recommended to me at the food court. They were like, you should go into that fucking kitchen convention because they have all kinds of wine in there in the back. So I was like, okay, great. So I like ran into the
I gotta
kitchen.
get my liquor on. So I ran to the kitchen convention.
I ran into this convention where it was all like counters and sinks and tables and all this kind of stuff, and ran to the back. And there's no bars, nothing. And I was like, fuck. And then I realized like every table had a bottle of wine on display. And I was like, you know what? I'm just taking one of these bottles of wine. I don't give a shit. I'm going to like just drink it out of the bottle and be like, whatever. And I literally had like my hand out to take one of the bottles. And I was like, fuck, damn, I'm totally going to get arrested. I'm going to be like carried out here in handcuffs. And they're going to be like, I'm going to see Dan DiDio and Jim Lee and all those guys. Like,
they're like, we knew it.
I know. Like,
you're scum, Snyder.
I have a meeting with them, I swear. So I didn't. And then I met with them. And they asked me where I wanted to work in the DCU. They said they were looking to bring over more people from Vertigo and other medium essentially into the DCU. And I was like, well, Gotham is my absolute the place I want to work more than any other. And they asked me if I had an idea, and I pitched this idea for a Commissioner Gordon story in the backup of Detective Comics because I knew that was opening up. I'd heard that, and so the idea was essentially that Commissioner Gordon, in his free time, tries to solve the cold cases that he never was able to solve in the actual kind of series with Batman and that stuff. So it was going to be like his files, right?
Nice.
And I remember them being like looking at me like, what's the cover going to be? It's going to be like him and Dusty bifocals looking through, whatever. I mean,
right.
Like,
it's not very action oriented.
I was like, that sounds awesome. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yes, and he'll be wearing a robe. It'll be great. But they were really nice about it. And when I got to the selling point of it, or the thing I thought would be really interesting, was that I always was fascinated by the idea that in year 1, he has the son, James Jr., the infant that falls from the bridge that Bruce saves. And then that character just disappeared from continuity.
Isn't that fucking
entirely.
weird? And you can never quite understand, like, I mean, I know there have been different writers' continuities. They're always trying to spit and glue it together, or at least they were. But you're never quite sure what Barbara's relationship.
Yeah, was she his daughter or was she his niece? Right.
Yeah. But that kid, disappeared.
Just vanished. And so I said, well, the main story was essentially that he's been searching for that son who he suspects of being a sociopath or psychopath, but doesn't have any real evidence. And that Barbara believes that he is absolutely a psychopath responsible for a number of deaths. And it would always be a mystery, and that would be the backbone of the series, and it would culminate with that. And so they liked it, and they took it, and they said I could do it for the backups. And I was so excited. I called my wife. I was like, guess what? I'm going to be writing Batman, but it's going to be Commissioner Gordon, but Batman will appear like in a panel here.
Right.
And about 2 weeks later, I got a call from Mike Martz, the group editor on Batman, and he was like, you come into the offices, we want to ask you something. So I came in. It was one of the first times I had actually been in the offices too. And they took me to this big conference room, and it was him and Ian Sattler and a couple guys, and they were like, the feature on Detective Comics opened up, and do you want to write that too and just have the whole book? And I was just like, absolutely. I 100% want the feature, because the idea to me was that it would be so fun to take that concept that was personal to me, or that notion of the city essentially throwing at Commissioner Gordon something that he couldn't deal with. Because for me, the idea of Gotham is that the way I've played it so far, I guess, is this notion that it's essentially like it brings your worst nightmares to life, and it will create these villains for you if you take the mantle of the King or Batman or a hero in the city in some way that represent your worst fears about yourself. So Two-Face is, this duality of Bruce's life, and the Joker's like, what if he breaks his rule and falls into madness? And the notion of that, what if it did that to Commissioner Gordon and said to you, you're a great detective. You solve everything by all this evidence. You add it up and you always get the answer. Well, what if we throw at you the one thing you'll never be able to solve because you're too close to it, and make your son a character that is always fucking with you so that you don't know if he's actually a psychopath or not, and you can't answer it, and he's going to get closer and closer and closer into you all the time until you let him in so close that he could destroy your world. And that
you were going to do this as a backup feature?
Yeah. And the idea,
at this point, you're like, hey, man, this could be the feature, or no?
Well, I was like, but Dick Grayson was in the cowl at that time because Bruce was kind of lost in time.
So this is pre the new 52.
Pre-52.
This is after 52.
Yeah, it's like the year right before the 52, leading up to it. It was like, I did 11 issues and then the 52 started. So it was like, the idea was, I was saying, well, Dick Grayson is new in the cowl. It's perfect to do the same thing because James Jr., the way I was going to write him, the son, was going to be a mystery to Commissioner Gordon because he's saying essentially, I love you, I'm your son, I'm misunderstood. People think that I'm a bad guy, but I'm taking my medication, and yes, I'm a sociopath, but that's a neurological disorder. It's not, I haven't hurt anybody. I just have an issue. I have a mental illness.
Right.
And meanwhile, to have him also be the villain for Dick Grayson, because Dick Grayson is a character who's so emotional and compassionate, as opposed to Bruce, who is, but hides it. To have a character that at his heart has the inability to care and the inability to feel for people would be a perfect mirror to him too. So the idea was, I knew I could do the feature as well and have it be a Batman story that functioned with him.
If in an odd way, if it was Bruce Batman,
he wouldn't give a shit.
Right.
Totally.
Cold
and that was
cold.
Exactly.
But
and
with Dick, you get a way where he's just like, how could he be this guy? So he's more emotionally invested.
That was the idea. And the idea was that Gotham is reshaping itself for Dick Grayson to say, yeah, Batman's villains wouldn't be scary to you. We're making new villains for you that are geared towards your Achilles heels. And the culmination of them will be this character who is your polar opposite. So it really was about Gotham changing and being kind of tribal in some ways, and this kind of animalistic, weird Gotham that's changing itself to be like a villain for Dick Grayson that was very different than the villain that it would be for Bruce, because Bruce would see that and be like, I'm not scared of James Jr. and punch him and that's the end. But James Jr. for Dick is very scary because he's saying, oh, I'm really misunderstood and I'm really like this. And Dick can't help but maybe consider that
playing on his sympathies,
right,
in a way that Bruce would just be like, punch him in the face. And
right. And so that was the idea. So they gave me that, and they were incredibly generous. Like,
did you name the Gordon kid? Did he have a villain name or something?
No, he was just James. That's it. He was just James, and they would call him James. And he looks like Jim. He has the glasses and red hair, and he's very sympathetic, and he's sort of, he really plays his heartstrings until he comes out to be a complete fucking nightmare at the end.
And he never dons a costume or anything?
No, and he captures Barbara and he stabs her. He has a sheet over her at the time. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry you feeling. He's like, hey, sis, he's like, I'm sorry you feeling. He frames the Joker actually in the story at one point for doing things to his mother and to Barbara. And then you realize it's him.
And this is crippled Barbara?
Yes, it's before the 52. And he has actually stabbed her in the arteries in her legs and she doesn't know because she can't feel it. And he pulls the sheet off and he's like, oh, sorry, Barbara, did I do that? He's really evil, like the darkest
you,
shit.
Man.
Yeah, I know.
And now I'm going back and get these issues. What is this, Detective?
It was Detective 871 to 881.
How adorable. You know the numbers.
Yeah. That was my first.
Of course, never get you first.
So it was DC was really cool. I mean, I think it was just that Detective was flying under the radar because Grant Morrison and Tony Daniel were dealing with Batman, and they were really big, and I was kind of nobody. So they just let me fight for the artists I want. They actually had a big Marvel artist on the book at the time, and when I got it, and I told Mike, Martz, that I was like, I can't believe I said this to him at the time because I was just nobody, but I was like, I don't think he's really right for the book. And Mike was like, all right, well, you get somebody else, you can do it. And I don't think he thought I really would get anybody else, but I through Vertigo, I had known Jock, who I loved his work and his covers and on Scalped and all that kind of stuff for Vertigo. And he's this big Englishman and he has this kind of quirky style. It's really dark. And I called him up, and I didn't know him at all. And he was on his way to a pub for dinner, of course. And he was like, oh, well, I don't think I have the time, but if I'm going to San Diego and if you can convince me, or he said basically, if I like the story, I'll do it. So I just bought a ticket to San Diego, and I was like, I'm going to San Diego to convince this guy to do it. And that's my whole mission. I went there, and I was like, all weekend, all I was about was meeting Jock and finding him and getting him to do this story.
What is his name?
Jock. His name's Mark Simpson. He'll kill me for telling you that's his real name, but his art name
He goes
Jock.
under Jock.
Yes. And so we went there. I took him out. We went out to a bar. It was like me, him, and a couple other guys.
Jock or Jock?
Just Jock.
Like
no,
J-O-C-K?
No. Yeah, J-O-C-K. Like,
That's such a weird name for like an artist, like
I know.
cartoon, like a comic book artist, no less.
I know.
It's kind of it'd be like, calling fucking, let me see. It'd be like calling an athlete a fucking nerd or geek or four-eyed.
I know.
You know what I'm saying? It's just weird.
I know it is, but he's definitely like a gentleman and like the most soft-spoken, nice guy in the world, which makes it even funnier. But he's got this really gritty style, and I met with him at this bar, and I was terrified that if I didn't keep up with him at the bar, he would think I was a total pussy and wouldn't do the Batman story, And he's much bigger than me. I'm not a very big person. I was just like, all right, let's have a beer. And by the end, I was so drunk, just being like, and then James Jr. is gonna stab Barbara in the fucking.
I was like, story to him, all wasted.
Like, he's gonna stab her in the fucking legs. It's gonna be crazy. And he liked it, and he said he would do it. And I went home, and I shit you not, like I was typing this email to Mike Martz, and I was like a Batman editor, and I was like, guess what? Jock is in, and I totally fell asleep with my hand on the button and woke up for like 5 seconds later and hit like 100 ends. You know what I said? I was like, but he decided to do it, and this other really great artist, Francesco Francavilla, who does really noir kind of stuff, did the backups, and it was just a really different kind of book, and DC was great about letting us do it, and we got to the end of it, and then they told us we were doing the 52, and
now here's again, we got a bunch of people who are like 52, fucking blah blah blah. DC, let's talk continuity. We'll go off on a quick thread tangent about continuity and how it works at DC as best we can, keep it kind of tight. Back when they created the comic books, like let's say Golden Age or something like that, it wasn't called the Golden Age, it was comic books. Then at a certain point, a bunch of new creators took the old characters, had fresh spins on them, or created kind of modern day parallels. If you look at the Golden Age Flash and the Silver Age Flash, there's a difference. One guy's wearing a fruit bowl on his head with wings, and the other guy looks like the Flash we all know and love with the big red jumpsuit that covers him from head to toe. So an appellation, I guess, that came later on. I don't know if they referred to it. Did they refer to the Silver Age as the Silver Age in the Silver Age?
At the time, I don't know.
I don't know either, but maybe it's just something that history gives. But the Silver Age is kind of like when writers came in and did new spins on old favorites and created the idea of like, hey, your old favorites, though, they all still, that shit's happening. This is comic books, and it's happening on another Earth, Earth 2, Earth 3. Earth X, they create a bunch of different parallel universes where Batman can be married to Catwoman and have a fucking kid and stuff like that. Later on, DC would call shit like that Elseworlds and create like one-shot stories about it. Imagine if Batman fucking, was a vampire or something like that. So the continuity at a certain point was very confusing to a lot of people, and what many, I guess, would consider the modern age. I don't know if history is still sufficiently named it as well as they named Golden Age and Silver Age, but for lack of a better expression, let's call it the modern age. We're talking Frank Miller, we're talking Alan Moore, we're talking I guess Batman Year One, Dark Knight Returns, basically when comic books suddenly grew up, got gritty and shit like that. They threw away most of the silliness, gone were the days of fighting on giant typewriters and whatnot. This is the age of the graphic novel, man. So we'll call it modern age. Modern age of comic books is what we've been living in for the last, maybe 20 years or more at this point. And then what just snuck up on everybody. Nobody sees change coming. And no fandom ever wants to release its own fucking claim on the fiefdom. Like a thief in the night, the digital age snuck in there. Digital age is exactly what it is, man. Like now you can buy comic books on your smartphones, on your iPad, your tablets, what have you. But everything started changing again based on the economics of the comic book world. What happened was you don't have a shit ton of fucking readers, but you do have a shit ton of licenses. Like comic books weren't getting the attention that they were getting, say, in the 90s, or the sales at least. But now, let's say special effects in the movies have caught up with the imaginations of comic book writers and artists for years, who've been showing us amazing feats and daring do and wonder with characters and costume doing fucking cool things. Now they can do it in movies, man. No strings, don't look silly anymore and whatnot. Anything you can imagine, they can make come to life digitally. So in a world where you can watch the Avengers beat the shit out of Loki and the fucking aliens that were not Skrulls, what are they called? I always forget.
Centauri.
Centauri, yeah. You know, why would you sit back and read a comic book like that? Kids nowadays are like, well, I'll fucking watch the Avengers, or we'll watch Thor, Captain America, fucking Iron Man. And if I really want to be involved, like if the one story's not good enough for me, well, I'll pick up the video game and fucking play it, or any of the online gamings and stuff like that. So it's tougher to capture a kid's imagination, to start reading a comic. It's tough to breed new readers. For a while, the comic book community was long considered the domain of older folks like myself. Like, we were aging, the comic book community was aging itself out of its audience. As a guy who owns a comic book store and has owned one or two back in the day, you never see kids in that place. You know, it's pretty much adults. You know, you catch comic book readers used to be caught back in the golden and silver age at the newsstand, all in color for a dime. You're hooking your readers just like cigarettes at a very, very young age. But in the modern age of comic books, even though shit got awesome for those of us who were reading comic books and we were of a certain age, you know, let's say 18 and up at that point, it at the same time really started to kill the marketplace, because as fucking awesome as The Dark Knight Returns is, can't give that to a fucking 5-year-old. You know, at least not then. Now you can. Now you can literally show them a fucking animated film of The Dark Knight Returns. But at that point, they started not intentionally alienating, but they were like, look, kids aren't coming as much. You know, you have video games were starting to be competitive at that point for kids' attention. Internet was burgeoning. So they're like, look, we'll focus on who's reading, and that's adults. And I'm never going to say, oh, they fucked themselves or blah, blah, blah. I benefited greatly from that era. You know what I'm saying? I look back at the golden age and silver age stories, and I don't know that I would have been a comic book fan, but growing, you know, my passion for comics in the modern age, reading the works of people that were taking these fucking characters seriously, you know, in a way where, like, I loved the Batman TV show growing up. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, at a certain point, you turn your back on it because you're like, it's fucking camp trash. They're whoring the Batman. You know, he's a bat whore. And then later on you go like, you know what, man, there's room for all sorts of Batman out there. It doesn't have to be the one true Batman or anything, but I loved reading the modern age stuff. But I think with distance, it's kind of safe to say they were writing for people like me, and they weren't writing for kids anymore. So kids fucking fucked off. They went away, did other shit. So now, you know, DC Comics, Marvel did it kind of a little bit, yeah, very much so, with what is their not Pocket Universe, but
the Ultimate.
Yeah. When Marvel kind of with Ultimate Spider-Man and with the Ultimates, which was essentially Ultimate Avengers and stuff, they kind of kick-started a new universe over at Marvel Comics where they were telling you familiar stories but freshly told, and old villains reconfigured and represented and whatnot, while they still had their own current continuity going on. And a lot of people, of course, as people do, it'll never fucking work. Well, it's working just fucking great. And many could argue that it spawned the Spider-Man movies. They're pulling directly from those Ultimate books at this point. Not to mention the fucking Avengers. The Avengers movie that you saw was very influenced by the Ultimates and everything they were doing over at Marvel to kind of, for lack of a better description, young it up. So over at DC, man, they also got the same idea. They're like, look, man, sales are in the fucking turlet. They had themselves a mini-series event over there where, you know, at one point back in the day, in the 80s, they got rid of the weird continuity of the Silver Age and the Golden Age by doing a miniseries event called Crisis on Infinite Earths. Yeah. One of the greatest fucking comic book miniseries ever written that isn't really all that awesome. But, you know, you remember
at the time. Yeah.
Oh, my God, you remember it so fondly. Yes, the death of Supergirl. Spoilers. Barry Allen gives his life for the universe, watching characters facing their own demise. Old Superman with the Superman, fucking
the gray
sideburns. Yes, shit like that. But when you go back and try to read it, man, it's like there are people popping up for a panel just to be like, no, reacting to something horrible coming. But it was a miniseries event. And no knock on the writers or artists by any stretch of the imagination. It did exactly what it needed to do, particularly for that audience at that age, in the age that I was when I read it. But it's a book that trimmed their continuity down from what was a multiverse, i.e., Earth 1 Batman, Earth 2 Batman, and shit like that, to one universe. They destroyed everything except for one universe. This is the one continuity, easy for everyone to follow and stuff. And again, that was more aimed at the adult reader, the readers they already had. That's not something you do for a kid. So for years you had this one universe, and then they did a mini series. Which one was it? It was Ultimate Crisis, maybe, that kind of reopened the multiverse. This is decades fucking later. Jeff Johns over at DC, I think, was behind that. He'd been writing. He's a big fan favorite, and you could tell he loved the DC fucking universe, same way fucking Snyder does. You read Batman, one thing you understand is this cat loves Gotham, loves Batman. Same thing when you read Jeff Johns' what was it? Not the Justice League, Justice Society.
Yeah,
it just dripped with DC continuity and stuff. So he does a miniseries, and I think, if I'm correct, the
Infinite Crisis.
That kind of reopens the multiverse and is setting DC up. Nobody knows where it's going. I don't know if they knew. I mean, did they tell you when they hired you for detective?
Before.
So that was, it was already moving moving along. And what they decided to do was off of this miniseries event called 52, where they took their big characters, the big guns, away or something like that.
Yeah. And then they did a year. Yeah, it was that was all before I was there, but they did a number of events leading up to sort of the time when I was there, which kind of had a continuity going that was sort of built on the stuff that had come before. And
the
then
modern age. You were still dealing in that continuity that I was talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And then they decided to do this new 52 idea, which was sort of rebooting or relaunching all of the titles at number one. And
which was in the comic book community naturally fucking controversial as hell, but in this, it did exactly what it was meant to do. Sales, for the first time in fucking decades, DC Comics holds like the top 8 spots in the top 10 on some months, and this is following the Avengers, which is over $1 billion gross to the box office. You imagine every Marvel book would be right up front, but DC's very risky gamble of relaunching their entire line with the new 52 really panned out in a big bad way. But, and this is not like fucking Scott's gonna apologize or explain, but if you can, this is the one thing I can't understand.
Sure.
What's the continuity? Like, there's some shit happens, some shit
I know,
doesn't.
it's confusing.
Is there a Bible that you're working from, or they're just do what you want? We'll tell you if it's wrong.
No, and again, this is Dan and them would kill me for talking about it, but I will. But I
don't want you to get fucking in trouble.
No, it's all right. They need me. The idea
they fucking do, dude. I read those books. They do need you.
What happened was, leading up to the 52, first I had done the detective story, and I had come up with the Court of Owls, and I told them I wanted to do it, and Mike was like, well, Tony Daniel, who was working on Batman at the time, wanted to move to detective and do something more mystery based. So he said, why don't you switch? So I was like, oh my God, I'm doing Batman. I can't believe it. I'm so excited. Batman number, 780, whatever. And then a couple weeks later, he's like, no, actually it's going to be Batman number 1. I was like, I'm quitting. No way. I'm not doing Batman number 1.
So they fucking told you, snuck attacking on him. We were like, hey man, that story you love, you're going to relaunch fucking, so you were scared?
Oh, I was terrified. My wife, I was like, I should just call in sick all year. I was like completely terrified. I mean, I was, I'd never written Bruce before. I'd only written Dick, and the whole notion of doing it in the first place was paralyzing. But the idea of doing it as a number 1 really was just cripplingly intimidating. And it wasn't until I could just really, I honestly went back and watched a ton of the animated series and was just like, you know what? They made their own version of Batman. It's so different than what I had read in the comics at the time. And I remembered waiting all the time to watch those episodes and knowing that it was such a singular version, like a weird mishmash of Art Deco stuff and the 50s noir and like modern stuff. And I'm going to just make my own and pretend that nobody's reading it. And that's it. Like, I'm just doing it as fan fiction for myself.
Look at you, man.
And I really, really had to do that and be like, this is not a comic coming out in the world. This is just for me. This is my ideal Batman, and that really freed me up. But what happened with the continuity was that they said, with a lot of the characters, like Superman, there were things they really wanted to try and redo, like the marriage to Lois, or things to make them fresher for new readers.
Right.
And for Batman,
pulling those kids we were talking about that are so missing. This
Yeah.
new 52 is kind of designed to bring kids back, to be able to be entry level for anybody. So basically, in a world where you got Chris Nolan's fucking Batman movies taken off, and Warner Brothers now talking about Justice League and stuff, there's more of an interest now, or at least people's glance goes over comic books more now than it did 5 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And they've said, while we've got the world's attention, let's not say, hey, jump on board Batman 787.
Right.
It's much easier to say, here's Batman #1, because you're going to appeal to people who are like, oh, fucking, hey, I can jump in now. I can start from a #1. You'll also grab some people who are like, I got to have the #1, man. So you grab those cats again. But it's a great way to kind of kickstart something that, has been around for quite some time. And I imagine there must have been a moment where you're like, fuck, man, I don't want to necessarily be the guy that launches the book.
No, I did not. I did not want to be that. I was like, can't you do one more? Just do 11 more issues and then do #1.
Right.
Or I was really terrified. I mean, I'm still, honestly, I still get terrified at the beginning of every story. And I'm here with my friend James, who writes the backups, and he'll tell you. I mean, I call him up 2 a.m, just being like, oh, this is the one I'm going to jump the shark. Right, I'm totally fucking this one up. Because it's so intimidating. Because my 5-year-old wears Batman shit everywhere. He's got his Batman backpack, and this has nothing to do with me. I kind of hide my Batman stuff from him, but the character means so much to so many people, and to you as a kid growing up. That it's just paralyzing to write him and absorb that. You have to just block it out and say, I'm doing it for myself, and imagine that no one's reading it in some way, or all I do is compare it to the animated series, or to Miller, or to O'Neill, or any of those characters, any of that, and it's impossible. But with the continuity, what happened was that they said each group can kind of decide what's in continuity and what's not. And for us in Batman, the irony is, as we became, I was pretty friendly with all the other people writing the Batman books, Gail Simone and Kyle Higgins and Pete Tomasi, and it really came down to, we loved the history as it was, so we decided not to change anything. So it was like, oh, all that stuff happened, No Man's Land and Nightfall and everything. So as Batman's continuity stands, even though he's a little younger and he's been operating for a shorter period of time than I think you would have thought, we all imagine, or I imagine writing it, that his history is the same, essentially. That doesn't mean, for example, right now, in Batman, we're doing this Joker story where the Joker kind of comes back, having been away for a year after he got his face kind of cut off, or had it cut off.
And I guess that was a conscious decision of look, man, let's leave Joker out of things for a little while.
Yeah, that was really, DC said, why don't we leave some of the big super villains out for a bit so that you guys can create your own villains. And I was already doing my own story, so I was like, yeah, whatever, and Tony, who's working on Detective, said he wanted to get rid of the Joker by having either his face cut off or have him a couple other options. And I said, well, if you do that one, I have a story that's been in my head for a while that I can do afterwards. So right now we're doing this big Joker story in Batman, where Joker essentially looks at the Bat family and says, Batman, you've accumulated all of these allies, and you've become fat and slow and weak, and essentially, I'm your greatest ally. I'm your friend. I'm the one that kept you sharp. I'm your court jester. You're the king of Gotham. You're the Bat King. And the same way the court jester in history has sometimes, one of his biggest jobs is to deliver the terrible news of the kingdom to the king because he can make him laugh. I'm here to deliver the worst nightmares of your heart to you. And if you survive them, it makes you stronger. And that's what makes you a better Batman. But instead, you've forsaken me for these fucking pussies that essentially make you want to believe that you're whoever you are under the mask, Bruce Wayne or whatever, and that you're all soft and caring and all of that. And your real royal court, your true family is here in Arkham, is Two-Face and all of these characters. And we're the ones that keep you strong as the Bat King. They're the ones that corrupt you. And part of the event is essentially, the story is the Joker is walking him down memory lane. So with the continuity, it's difficult because they still, every once in a while, someone changes something in another book and it makes it so that this might not have been able to happen. But I've been kind of a dick about it and just been like, everything that happened. I'm just doing it that way. So Joker at one point coming up I can't really give it away, but he has like this crazy sort of tribute to all the things that have happened between him. And you see Joker Fish and 5-Way Revenge and all the kind of awesome Joker stories from the past done in this horrific, grotesque way. So from my standpoint and the standpoint of the people in the Bat family, what I would say is, on the one hand, you're going to have to roll with it, and that there are going to be changes to some characters in other books, peripheral books, whether it's Tim Drake and Teen Titans or Red Hood or that kind of stuff. But the way we proceed, at least at this point, is to try and imagine that all the history happened, and if we do change it or we change it in some way, it's to really try and honor what came before and not change it for the sake of being shocking or sensational, and it is confusing and it can be difficult. Like, why is Damian, if he slept with Talia and 6 years ago, why is Damian 10? And all that stuff. But all I would say is, like, if you're going to be that rigorous about it, you know what I mean? Maybe he had an aging pill. Who knows?
But are you a comics kid? Were you a comics kid growing up?
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's tough not to be rigid about that stuff, particularly when you're mired in the continuity. Like, if you weren't writing it, you'd be like, "What are they doing?"
That's the problem.
You eloquently explain it though. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's probably the best explanation I've heard of what's going on in the New 52. But the best example of what's going on in the New 52 is definitely Court of Owls. The story itself fucking speaks for itself. For those who haven't read it, we'll talk about this and then we'll jump back in time because we got to follow a thread. How the fuck did you get to Batman? The Court of Owls storyline concerns this kind of hidden clandestine Illuminati type organization in Gotham that predates Batman himself and goes very, very far back into the city. And the notion is a really cool one. Like, they just definitely touched upon in the book, but when you think about, like, who's Batman's opposite, people go, oh, the fucking Joker. And you go, well, why? Is the opposite of a bat a clown? Like, no, not really. So in the Court of Owls storyline, what Scott has delivered is a foe for Batman that is actually kind of the opposite of a bat, or a bat predator. Like, so, you know what I'm saying? Like, it sounds dopey. Like, you can't even go like, well, the natural enemy of a bat is a penguin. Like, no, his rogues gallery just happenstance. But suddenly you have like a villain that just even the name connection makes sense. Aside from that, just looks fucking badass. You know, that's a big part of any character sell, man. It's like the reason why we still like Boba Fett, even though he's a character who gets eaten by the Sarlacc pit. He just looks fucking good. When you're writing it, do you come up with the design of the outfit? Like shit, like the picture, when you see the Court of Owls, like the old pictures dated and shit. Those weird little...
It's creepy, right?
Oh, those fucking masks are fucking chilling, dude. Now, when you're writing it, do you like, I want to use this owl's face, blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
Or do you just kind of let Greg go do whatever he wants?
Well, Greg's amazing. I mean, the funny thing about Greg is, like, we completely didn't get along when we started at all. Like, we're like 100% different people, where I'm really I'm more kind of totally neurotic and protective of the script, and he's from an era in comics where he would get more of a kind of outline and then be able to do whatever he wanted.
We mentioned that before. I mean, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Greg, I remember his name from the Chaos days.
Yeah, and Spawn and
or is that it? Maybe it's Image more than Chaos.
No, and he did Quasar, and he was
really. So he's been a jack of. I remember that. Yeah, I guess now that you mention it, maybe I'm not. Maybe it's more Spawn that I connect him with. Like, wasn't he
was on Spawn a long time?
Yeah, like there was McFarlane, and then he
took over,
and he was the guy that took. That's right.
Yeah, so he was really used to getting more outlines and scripts, and he's a huge guy. I don't know if you've ever seen him, but he's like a WWE. He's like gigantic, like just huge muscles, just giant guns. Yeah.
And I mentioned that I like his art very much.
I know, and I'm like the guy that rides in the sidecar while he rides the Harley. You know what I mean? And he's.
Your little dog jumps over. Spike is my friend. He's big and strong.
Yeah, exactly. And when we got together, they put us together on DC because they were like, oh, you know, this guy, he's been doing Image forever, but we really believe he has this tremendous potential. And I knew his stuff, and I was like, great, let's do it. And he was kind of like, I'm used to working from outline, and you know, I hope you'll do that for me. And I was like, no, I'm used to working from absolute full script, 40-page script, and I hope you'll do that for me. And he's like, well, I'm just nervous about some of the elements of this, of your script or the story getting in the way of the art. And I was like, well, I'm nervous about your fucking art getting in the way of my fucking story. We were just like totally like, and I was like,
and at this point, you're like, can I get a different artist, please?
Yeah, no, I literally had it written in an email to Bob. I've told Greg this since. I was just like, one of us might have to leave this fucking book, Bob, Harris, whatever, like totally angry about it. And what happened was Bob was like, you know what, get on the phone and talk the story because you haven't talked the story. And I did, and I told him the Court of Owls, and he did some designs exactly then for the Talons where he was like, what if we do the masks like this and we make them like executioner hoods? And we got along from then. And now 2 years later, almost 3 years, 2 years later, we're like, he's one of my best friends in the world. He's like my older brother, and we go away to cons that we can go to with our wives and hang out. And he's like,
oh,
we talk. I know it's corny.
Cry.
I know,
adorable.
It's corny. I know, but it's really
corny,
true.
it's sweet.
It's true. Like I talk to him almost every day, email. Like he really is the best artist. He's so he cares so much about Batman and about Gotham and delivering to you guys that read the book like the most complete vision he can give you, where he redoes pages that they don't ask him to redo, and he's like a machine. Every day is a page or 2 pages. I've never seen that before. And with all the great artists I work with, but like he'll even go to the hospital for like a fucking exam, and he still sends a page on a Saturday from having to be there for all kinds.
He likes drawing.
He's
not just a job.
No,
he enjoys drawing.
He loves Batman and he loves Gotham.
Is that what it comes down to?
Yeah,
He's just like, I'm a fucking massive Batman fan.
He is. He really is.
He does him justice, man. His Batman is fucking beautiful.
Where do you see the stuff coming up in the Joker stuff is so amazing. But he does the designs, and what I've learned to do is that I was definitely more wrong than him in terms of the way we worked, and I've come to accept that I was way too controlling about the scripts with him, and I've given him a lot more room where I still write full script, but I'll do pages where it'll be like my favorite issue of the Court of Owls is that 5 where it turns.
Yes,
read it,
which
right?
I read on an iPad. And I had to lock screen
it, right?
in order to do it. I thought it was me.
And that was his idea, where I was like, I just want you to do. Here's the issue. Here's the dialogue. Here's the paneling. But if you can think of anything that would make it cooler, go for it. And he was just like, what if we change the paneling and just turn it, make it so? I was like, go for it,
Yeah.
And we had to fight DC on that. They really didn't like it. They were like, everyone's going to think it's a misprint. And Greg wrote this really impassioned email where he was like, sometimes in life, like as Bill Gates said, he's like, you have to be foolish. You know what I mean? And this is our time. And I was like, fuck yeah. Like we have to be foolish.
You're
like
standing up for art, man.
Oh yeah. And we stood up for it together as a united front. And they were like, all right, let these guys do it. So we did it. And then we were all excited. And then we got it in PDF. I was like, see, those assholes, like they fucking thought it would look bad. It looks great. Because you read it in PDF, it goes vertically. And I read it on my computer, so it was just like this. And I was like, see, they're all worried about nothing. And then I got my comps, and you actually turned the comic, and I was like, fuck, it's a misprint. So I went on, I looked at it for like about 5 minutes, and I was like, no, that's the way we did it. So I went online on Twitter, and I was like, hey, just so you guys know, everything in Batman 5 is deliberate. And Greg called me up like 30 seconds later, and he's like, don't be a fucking pussy, man. If they don't get it, they don't get it. They don't get it. Like, put it down, like, erase that. So I was like, fuck, delete. And I deleted the tweet. And then literally, I swear to God, I shit you not, like an hour later, he got his comps, and I saw him tweet. He's like, fuck, there's a misprint in Batman 5. And I called him up, and I was like, no, dude, it's a fucking thing. Take your own advice. I was like, no, take
so
that down.
It was not a misprint.
No,
it's just
wasn't.
when you guys saw it in bold color.
Yeah, it looked crazier than we thought. And when we had fought for it, we thought it wouldn't look that crazy, but we were really proud of it. But that's what I mean is that guy, Greg, he contributes so much to the book, just not pages, but ideas, like, and the story and everything. I couldn't have a better partner. And we're locked in together for a whole nother, we're going to be on it together for another, year and a half. So
you guys become massive fan favorites, man. Like whenever your name naturally came up in regards to this podcast, I would say his name followed beyond there as well.
He's the best.
I again, like having not dove into the New 52, I was going to say that deeply, but really at all. I had no idea. And when I kind of dropped myself into the story, it's beautiful to look at.
It is.
And
great.
Wonderful to read. Like you give a shit big time about doing stuff that ain't been done before, which is hard in the Batman universe. That Batman universe, as much as you want to add new spokes to the wheel, they don't like that. They want familiarity as well. You can't take the character too far flung. And you did a dangerous high wire act
at the end. Yeah.
Oh, fucking big time. Where as a reader, I was just like, I will hold judgment until the next issue.
I know, right?
But you found an elegant way to play it exactly, which I assume is what you wanted. Could be true.
Yeah.
Could not be true. And we'll see down the road. And without ever once, like, you allow anybody who'd be like, that would never happen. You allow them their purchase, and then you allow people like, oh shit, an interesting wrinkle in the fabric of the Wayne tapestry that we're all so fucking familiar with. You brought something fucking new, something fresh to it, man. That's crazy.
Thanks. It was scary to do. I mean, it was there from the very beginning, the big stuff at the end, but the idea was really that I wanted it to be that the city, Bruce says, I know you, and that's the first issue. He can take his rogues. He can narrate to you without even fucking worrying about it. So he's like fighting Croc. He's fighting Clayface. He's fighting everybody. And he's just like talking to you, the reader, like, in Gotham, I read the paper sometimes. And it's like this. And he doesn't give a shit. But have it be that he knows it so well. But what the city is saying, like, you think you know me that well. But in fact, there's this mystery that you never believed was true. That is true. And he's like, all right, maybe it's true. Maybe there is this owl society. Who gives a fuck, But then it's like, no, it's not just true, but they're in your buildings. It's like, all right, well, that's kind of messed up. I never knew they were in my buildings. Okay, well, it's not only in your buildings, but we had a whole history with Dick Grayson. It's like, oh, okay, now it's getting closer.
That was a twist, like from the DNA finger match Dick Grayson thing. I was like, all right, man, well, we know that ain't gonna be fucking true. But I didn't see the other thing, which I loved, and the backhand was awesome.
Thanks.
That was
everyone comments about that. It's like
that was awesome. What was really nice is with the tag up at the end of the story where, he's just like, I still owe you for punching me in the face. There's a bit of older brother, little brother, Apollo, Rocky to that moment, and then. Bruce does something where, Dick is just like, well, I guess I won't. I feel bad about trying. But he says, like, I'm still going to try to get you or whatever. And, like, Bruce just has this, like, you'll try. Like, a really nice kind of, like, I'm the fucking, fuck you, I'm Batman.
Well, the guy that writes Nightwing, Kyle, is always like, when do I get my punch? When do I get to punch you back? I'm like, fuck off. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
All right, let's jump back. You're a city kid. Growing up here, where do you go to high school?
I went to a school called Riverdale that was up in the Bronx.
Is that the one? And did you ever see that movie, the Spike Lee movie, 25th Hour? They reference Riverdale because I remember watching that movie and being like, "Is that the Archie fucking Riverdale?"
It's that kind of school. It's a very preppy private school. Yeah,
I don't know if it's the one that was in the movie, but I saw like what it looked like. They wear a uniform and shit, but it's not. It's like a Catholic school without a uniform or with a uniform.
No, it's just a very preppy school. It's you got a great education there. It's definitely for costs a lot of money. And it's all that kind of stuff. So I was always.
What did your parents do? Were you guys well off enough to? Or
my dad
just have no choice in a city.
No, when I was growing up, my dad was a resident to become a doctor, and my wife is actually a resident now. So he always jokes with me that I've like married the son that he never had. You
That's
know what I mean?
funny.
When I was like, a comic book writer. But he was a resident, and then he, started his practice. And then when I was about 14 or 13, we moved to the Upper East Side, and I started going to this high school. And it was great in the way that I made friends that I still have today. But we were definitely the kind of more comic-y guys at that school. My best friend, the guy actually wrote another comic with Severed for Image. It's a horror comic. He had like long blue hair, and we were definitely the not the popular kids.
The alt kids.
Yeah, we weren't like picked on or anything, but we were just sort of, under the radar. But I went to school there for high school, and it was great in terms of the education. They got a great art. I wanted to be a comic book artist all the way through.
Can you draw?
I was okay. I was all right. I got to college, and I just started. There wasn't a program for comic book art, and it was sort of like there was a program for writing, and so I fell into that, and I started doing more writing. And,
had you done writing in Riverdale or in school?
I did. They had a writing class. I had like a writing class in high school with this woman, Susan Sherman. I still remember her name when I was a senior, and I wrote. It was actually, God, I haven't remembered this in forever. And I fell in love with writing at that point. I was still doing art. I had like a whole art portfolio of comic art. It was like Batman, all kinds of shit like that. Like a sculpture of Batman, actually, I took a picture of for my portfolio. It's like all clay, and it's supposed to be like a life drawing, but it's Batman, It's totally, I can't believe I got into college. But the writing class, it was like really literary writing. She was all about poetry and stuff. And I wrote this story I'll never forget. It was like called. It was about essentially a American Jack the Ripper who was the brother of the actual Jack. It was terrible, but at the time, I thought it was awesome.
That's not bad, dude.
It was like,
look, you're such a writer, man. You can't even spit it out. You're like, it was bad. That was a good idea.
It was good. Well, he lived in the Southwest,
and there's echoes a little bit in Court
the brother. That's right. Yeah. Well, he lived, and he was like, he and Jack the Ripper essentially were brothers, and Jack the Ripper like went to England to like go study and became Jack the Ripper, and he stayed here, and they both had this horrible father, and they killed their father, and he used to wear his father's face that was like a skull, and he would go around and by some strange twist of the imagination, a train had fallen off the rails because of an earthquake nearby their home, and it was buried. So it was this like underground train, and there was still kind of room in it, and that was his lair, and he would go into this train that went nowhere, and he'd come out, and I thought it was so awesome. And I remember on the final day,
it's not bad. Like, it is kind of awesome. Like that, you in a world where they did that Poe movie. The Edgar Allan Poe movie?
the John, yeah.
With John Cusack? Like, this is fucking viable. I'm in, man.
No,
like, that's a good spin on the fucking Jack the Ripper, where you're like, there was an American Jack the Ripper?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I read it. The funniest thing is, like, we had this final reading, and they didn't ask what you were writing, so it wasn't like they had any clue what you were doing.
How many people in the class?
It was about 18 people.
So you eventually all have to read it out loud to
You
one
read
another?
part of it out loud, and you go to, it was like one girl's house, and it was like a very fancy house, it's like spread, like the parents are there and everything. And I got up to read, and I was so excited. I had all these pages. I was like scribbling on it right up until the last minute, and I read it, and it was like the teacher actually asked me to stop, like 3 pages or 4 pages in, and she was like, "Thank you, that's great." And I guess it was, it was violent and it was gory and that stuff.
Get out of here! So you got the tap as if you were eating pussy. She was like, "You're done."
That's what I
3 pages in. Get up.
Yeah, and I was so hurt that I can't even believe I remember this. I got home, and it was like the next day, and I was so seething. I was so angry that I called one of one of my friends whose mom was on the PTA, because I was like, hey, I really need to ask that teacher a question. It's really important. Can I get her home number? And I called Susan Sherman. To this day at home, she was this old lady, really sweet. But I called her up, and I was like, I can't believe, I'm really offended. I worked on that so hard, and you stopped me, and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, I just didn't think, it was the most appropriate for that room and whatever. And I was like, well, I loved it. Nah. I was like out of my head and going on about it. And she was so sweet. She was like, I want you to know I really appreciate your passion. But she was like, but I'm at the hospital, like with my friend who has just suffered a mild heart. And I was just like, I'm the worst.
No.
I suck, And here I am, like arguing with her about my like skull-faced dad, Jack the Ripper, horrible story. And I was like, I'm the worst. But she was really sweet about it. And to this day, I really remember her saying that about, being impressed with the passion. But that was my first thing I fell in love with writing, was writing that story, where I knew I'd never had so much fun doing it.
How old were you?
I was 17,
It's
18.
magic, isn't it?
It was.
I mean, you don't know how to describe it to other people who don't do it. And there ain't no reason people can't do it. There's no, as we get further on, or I get further on in life, what you realize is, like, for years they tell you, these people are talented, these people are not. Bullshit. Everybody's talented.
No, it's just the work.
It's just the work if you put in the work. And writing is, some people chase a high, with booze, alcohol, of drugs, heroin, OxyContin, weed, whatever the fuck, sex. If you're looking for that, fill that emptiness, try being God. And that's what writing is. You get to be God for a little fiefdom that maybe, I think that's the second time I said fiefdom on this podcast, a little fiefdom is incredibly all your own, man. And it sounds corny or artsy fartsy to be like, it's magic, but it's nothing short of magic, man.
Especially at that age where you feel like you have so little control over everything, and you're picked on or whatever, and you suddenly control all of it. You control who lives and dies and everything, and it's such a it's the best feeling in the world. And I totally fell in love with it and just carried it. And I just fell out of doing the art, for a while, and
so you start taking writing. As many creative writing courses as possible, and you start looking at schools that are like.
I did.
So which one you wound up going?
I went to Brown because it was.
Where's Rhode Island?
It's Rhode Island. Yeah,
it's Ivy League, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is.
I'm not shaming you. I'm just saying, is it Ivy League?
It is.
No,
yeah.
You don't have to. It's cool. It's cool.
It was. It had a writing program that you could actually major in creative writing, and it was actually right up the hill from the art school, RISD. So I thought I could take at like Rhode Island School of Design. So I thought I could go there and take art classes and illustration and then do writing and do some kind of graphic novel. That was my
So
dream.
you are thinking comics at this point?
I was thinking comics. I was thinking either comics or some kind of, either something like that or an illustrated book. I knew I wanted to do the art. I just didn't know how to get into comics. So I went there, but then the semester schedule at the Rhode Island School of Design turned out to be like a trimester program where this was on you had to make all kinds of crazy fucking jumping through hoops to make it work. So I wound up just doing writing and not being able to take the art classes there. And I just fell in love with doing short stories and prose fiction. And so I fell into that. And
who are the influences? Who did you like? You were not like, this is who I want to be, but who are the people that you're like, oh shit, I like this kind of thing?
Well, growing up, my first big influence was Stephen King. All through.
What was your first King?
It was Eyes of the Dragon. I went away.
Really?
Yeah, when I was like a kid, my parents, I went to this sleepaway camp that was, it was like competitive sports camp. And I was a total fucking geek, and I was, I guess about 8 years old. It was called Brant Lake. I'll call it out. It was called Brant Lake. And it was like it was all boys also, which is totally fucked up when you're 8 or 9 years old. But you go there and it's like, and they have this color war at the end of the year, and when they pick you, you're that team for life. And
are you sure this fucking happened, or you're just thinking meatballs, dude? This happened?
I know, right? No, and there's the alien. No, it was totally true. And what happens is like they pick you for a color war, and you're that team for life. And I was always hiding at arts and crafts and all this shit. Just I never wanted to do any of the sports, and I was okay at it, but they. And then when they pick you, they pretend to play tug of war with you to one side or the other, and whichever counselor gets you, and you're either green or gray. And I was wearing all this Hulk pajamas, and they picked me and for gray, and they took me down. I tore off my Hulk pajamas. I was this fat kid. I was like, fuck. And all I did that summer was essentially work in arts and crafts, and it all boiled down that summer to every year they wanted to make it be like the 1 point, like everything comes down to one thing. And this year, my first year, they made it the arts and crafts point. And I was the only boy up there doing arts and crafts. And I had made this elaborate float that was like the gray Hulk. You know what I mean? Of like, because it was gray. And I was like, all I did was hide and work on this gray Hulk. And it won on the gray Hulk. And after that, everybody left me alone entirely to be like the guy that works on the float. But
fartsy dude.
It was, I know, right?
You don't play the sports.
It was that summer. I had this counselor, Ted, I still remember, and he began Eyes of the Dragon on the first night of the 8-week camp, and he finished it on the last. And it was like the highlight of my day was going to the bunk and hearing pieces of that story about Roland and Flag and all those characters. And I fell in love with it. And from there, my first book that I read.
Wait, is that Flag? Randall Flag?
Yeah, Randall Flag.
That's connected to the Stand?
Oh, yeah. To Eyes of the Dragon.
I'm not a king or whatever they call it. I've read the Christine, The Shining, the King books in my era. Mm-hmm. But I didn't go forward. When did that happen?
He's the villain in that. Flag. He's sort of the wizard, or he's like the consultant to the king, who's actually the evil guy in the book.
And this is like how many years after the Stand did you read this? 20 years or something?
No, this was back. I mean, this was back when in the 80s when it came out, I guess. So it was maybe 10 years after or so. I'm not sure what the date, but it was.
Right, so that's the first one. So you hadn't even read The Stand, and that.
No, I mean, I was only like
capturing your imagination.
Yeah, that captured it. And The Stand was like one of the next books I read. That and
Stand, man, you
Night Shift.
Drop that off a building, you kill a motherfucker. It's so heavy.
It's so good though.
Yeah, it's rich. That's where the name of Randall from Clerks came from. Was Randall Flag?
Oh, really?
Yeah, drop one of the L's. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I fell in love with that, and I was doing writing, through college, and then I decided to go to school for it afterwards. So I got a master's in fiction.
So you not only went to, you went to Brown and got your
undergrad,
and then in creative writing,
and
then where'd you go for
I went to Columbia for
so here in
masters,
the city,
yeah.
So you come back to the city,
yeah. So
your dad did do well as a doctor. Is that that's what we're hearing here?
No excuse.
Not only do you know the city well, but you also know the rich city well.
I was very spoiled I was very lucky to have my parents were embarrassingly supportive. I mean, were they
like, go be a writer?
Yeah, there was one moment when I finished college where I was like, I want to go be a writer. And they were like, you know what? Then why don't you go work at a publishing house or work at a thing? And I was like, I was all rebellious and I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go fucking work at Disney World and be a janitor. And I did. And I was just like, I thought that was the coolest thing. And they didn't really care. Did you go work
at Disney World?
Yeah, I did for a year after college.
Florida? Down in Florida?
Yeah. I was a janitor and
wait, is that the first place you lived outside of New York?
Yes. Well, outside of college. Yeah,
outside of college.
Yes, I moved down to Orlando. Yeah.
But could you drive at that point?
Yes, I could drive. I was 21. It was like I just had a car too, so I went down.
What was that like? What's it like to work at? Is it like I remember I had at one point Jason Lee was going to be doing this sitcom with Carsey Warner back in the day. It was right before Chasing Amy hit at Sundance, so we had shown like Jason was like, "Can you show them Chasing Amy?" Because they, all he had was Mallrats. So we showed them the flick, and they were like, "Hey, we're going to do the show with Lee. Do you want to be involved?" And I like Jason. I was like, "Yeah." Jason was like, "Please write the show." I was like, "All right, man. Yeah, I stayed involved as long as it's fucking fun or whatever." It never wound up going anywhere. Ironically, until fucking 20 years later, it's a whole different story. So there we are. They're like, we got to meet with potential leading ladies and stuff. And one of the people we met with was Darlene from Roseanne, Sarah Gilbert. And she had just, I guess, shot the Roseanne episodes where they went to Disneyland or Disney World or whatever. And she said that, I believe she referred to it as fascist regime. And she said the backstage was horrifying and blah, blah, blah. Now, my brother is a huge Disney nerd. We say Disney nerd to be polite, but when we're not recording mics, we call him a Disney fag. He's gay and he loves Disney. So there's he calls himself a Disney fag. Him and his husband, they've been married for like 20 years, which is my old joke, about 60 years in the straight community. They've been married for a long time. They moved down to fucking Orlando to be close to Disney and work in the Disney community. What did you do there?
Well, I went down there and I was a janitor. It was like before, we went back when it was real easy to get work. So I went down and applied and they hired me the next day to be a janitor at the Magic Kingdom. So I was that for, I guess, about 4 months.
How do they detail you? Like, today you're in Fantasyland, today you're in Tomorrowland.
Yeah, exactly.
They just shift you around the park?
Yeah, just like today's your shifts at area this, area that, and you get... Basically, your job is that you have 8 garbage cans and you push this huge ton cart around the park and you have to stuff 36 cans of garbage into those 8 cans. And before the parade, that's like the big thing. And if you don't, you're totally fucked because the parade happens and then the cans fill up all over again. And it's just like this total Sisyphus horrible thing. You just keep pushing it up this hill towards the castle. But I thought it was great because I was like, I just thought it was so... I had, basically at the time I was just kind of like, I wanted it to be kind of a fuck you to my whole, upbringing, and all the people I went to school with would be like, oh, I'm going back to my 5-year reunion. What are you doing? Oh, I'm working at fucking Goldman Sachs. I'm a fucking janitor at Disney World. Fuck you, I thought it was so cool that I was going to do that. Rebel. Yeah, I know. I look at myself and be like, you're just an asshole. But at that time,
it's a good move though, man. What'd you learn at Disney? Number one, you learned, I don't want to fucking work at Disney World.
Yeah. Well, the thing was, I moved up from being that. About 4 or 5 months after that, I was getting exhausted, and they were like, "Oh, we have an audition for characters to become one of the characters."
You got to wear a fucking costume?
Yeah. So I did it, and you dance. You learn this little dance. It was like you have this audition, and it's like 100 people in this gymnasium. I totally feel like they're gonna fucking sue me for talking about this.
Not at all.
Gonna go. Anyway, they're Disney. They're fucking Marvel. They're Marvel. Fuck you.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was like, you go to this gymnasium and there's this big mirror and you dance in front of it. They teach you the 6-step dance where you're like dancing like a dwarf from Snow White or something, where you're like, I'm marching around, and then ta-da, you do these big arms and everything, like jazz hands.
Big finish.
Yes, and I practiced it. I was so excited, like in my mirror, at home. I was like, fuck, I got to get this thing right. And and I went and I had like the number pinned on like 219, and
it's like something out of a chorus line.
Yeah, man. It was like, it was totally, it was like,
I'm dopey.
It was like my dream at the time, and I did it. And they were like, for about a week I didn't get a call, and then I got the call and they were like, yeah, we have one costume available if you want to do it. No one wants to do it. I'm like, I'm up for anything. And it was Buzz Lightyear.
Nice. At least you got a fucking cool character too.
Yeah. Well, the reason actually is, funny enough, and this is again, not to generalize or anything like that, but many of the people that work in characters, they are interested in getting into theater. And so the other characters that can move around more, like that have the fur costumes or the face costumes, that's
you can
the goal.
Be expressive.
Yeah. You can dance. You can do your thing. But Buzz Lightyear was fucking RoboCop with like these big foam
crucified
pieces.
Almost.
Yeah. You can't really
got the
move.
Wings behind you.
Yeah. And you can't move. It's just, you can't really bend your arms. All you can do is you have a stamp also. All the other characters can write their name, and all you have is like this mechanical stamp that's like on the kids' things. But it was awesome because you're the superhero. You know what I mean? You were the only superhero in the park. So I loved it. And so I was Buzz Lightyear for quite a few months as well. And some days I was Eeyore or whatever, but Buzz Lightyear was my main gig because nobody else wanted it. And so I did that for a while, and I got completely into it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this for another year. And some of my friends started to be like, you know what? You should really come back. You know, you got into grad
Scott,
school.
this is you're broken.
Yeah,
please leave the Disney empire.
Well, they do. You know, and again, like I know this is all like,
dude. They were going to pull you out like it was a cult.
Well, they did. My friend actually drove down and was just like, you know what, you're in school for writing. You got to go do this. Cause I was so excited. I loved it so much. I had like a girlfriend that worked in the department, the stores, which was a step up. When you're a janitor, you were the dregs, dude. Nobody will.
What was the worst
you.
thing you had to fucking clean up?
You don't
vomit, a lot of puke.
Vomit. Well, vomit is like the easy. It's the bathroom. You don't even want to go there. It was so awful.
It's
like,
just people like shitting all over.
Yeah, except the old people that can't push the cart, that giant ton cart, love to do the bathroom because it's easy because you walk between two bathrooms or whatever. But that was the worst. I mean, there's a lot of terrible things that you wind up cleaning up there, but mostly it was like
people try to fuck at the park.
Yeah, they all the time in the rides and stuff like that. But they always catch them. That's the thing is you can't get away with anything at Disney World. Like if you steal like a pen, everywhere. Yeah, they pull you out. I mean, they pull you out. We saw people crying. Oh, I didn't mean to do it all the time. Like every day, it's like completely. They see everything. So don't fuck or try and steal anything at Disney World because they will see it and pull you out, and all the janitors will watch and laugh at you for real. But one of the funny things about janitor was like. They're all also, you know, nobody wants to be a janitor. And so they all try and get back at the park in like little ways that they can. So we would all I stole my coat. I still have my Magic Kingdom coat. You know, you smuggle things out and they check your bags and everything. You manage these ways. But yeah, I was a character for a while and I got really into it. And I was like so excited because I totally fell for it. And they pay you still minimum wage, you know.
That's it? You in that costume?
$5.15 an hour at the time. But
you can imagine they give you hazard pay because that shit's like hot.
It was hot. You have weather 1, weather 2, weather 3, which is like weather 3 is like if it's 85 degrees, it's like weather 1, 90 degrees is like, and then they shorten the time that you're out there. But
so it's like, so even if it's 100 degrees, that's like weather 3. It doesn't mean you can't go outside.
Oh, no,
it means
you
can only go out a little bit.
Yeah, and they give you 8 pairs of shorts and t-shirts at the beginning of the day, and you sweat through each one. You get out and change each one. One like that. It's crazy. You never pee. You drink like Gatorade after Gatorade. You never have to piss. You just sweat it out. It's crazy.
It's massive.
I was in awesome shape at the end, and you're just like you're totally
like I arrived at
Batman.
Disney as a fat kid, but I left fit and trim.
But they were like, oh, you know, we really they came up to me. I remember towards the end, and they were like, guess what? We really like what you're doing in the characters, and we have an opening in Disneyland Tokyo. And they were like, the thing is, over here, you're not tall enough to be Prince Charming, but over there, you are.
So they wanted you out of costume?
Yeah, they were like, over there, I could actually be tall enough to be the no costume face. And I was like, my dream. I was like, yes, I'm doing it, Prince Charming. That was because when you're in there, that's like the golden ring. Like Prince Charming gets all the girls. He's like the best, you know.
Is that in the world of character playing?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like I mean, backstage at the park?
Most of the guys that work in characters are gay. So, you know, I don't know, but I mean, that was like, if you were in characters and you were a straight guy, it was sort of like, the rarity.
Heaven.
Yeah, because so it was like, oh, I have to go to Disneyland Tokyo. And my friend Scott, who the same one that wrote Severed with me, who's like my oldest friend, son 13, was like, came down, saw what was happening, and was like, no, you're leaving. And he was just like, we're leaving.
Disney zombie,
you're
dude.
into school, you're leaving. So I left and went back and went to writing school. And the thing that it taught me, honestly, was that it was fascinating because you live in a world where it's hard labor. I mean, and the people that work in the park with you for minimum wage are from a fucking tough background, you know, and prison.
And they're all made to be like, smiles, everybody smiles.
Yeah, and it's tough because you have to go up there and make this place important and inspirational to people that you go home to your life and it's rough, you know, and you meet these people, it's rough for them, you know, especially in janitorial. But what's inspiring about it is that it's impossible. And you go down the tunnels, like you talk to each other and you're like, next time I go up there, I'm going to fucking kick over that fucking can and fuck Disney and they fucking suck. And then you go up there and some kid is like, you know, so excited to see Disney World be real and you can't do it. And all you can do is be excited that you play a part in making them feel like there is something, beyond the physical real world in the world, and there's magic in the world, and you get them an ice cream when you're not supposed to. And so it's a wonderful group of people that work there in that regard, because they suffer tremendously in what they, because it really is like that. Like, you work there for minimum wage, but you get deals on everything in town. So it feels like you're making more money than you are, because you have these deals with everything, but you're really not making money, and
what do you mean deals? Like, you get fucking 30% off if you
everything, like a book. Like at the beginning when you work there, you get a book of deals it was called Donald's Deals when I was there, and it was like a Donald Duck on the thing. And it was like 30% off or 40% off everything from, you're talking IHOP to fucking dental.
Oh, so you can wind up living cheaper rate, but for that reason, they don't pay you more money.
Right, but that's the thing. So you work at Disney and you make this minimum wage at that time. Maybe it's changed a lot, so I don't know, but that's when I was there. And the rates for everything drop. So but the problem is, if you get fired or something, like, you have no money, you know what I mean, in the bank, because you're still
pretty
making
much
minimum
living
wage.
Week to week, yeah.
Right. So the thing that was amazing about it was that it was a really interesting blend of, like, you go up and it's this fantasy world that you want to be true for people and you want to make real, and you go down and it's the hard realities of what it's like to live, in a place where you're not making a lot of money, and there are a ton of problems, and the kind of job you have isn't inspiring by any means. And so it was very eye-opening in that regard for somebody that grew up. I grew up in a relatively sheltered environment in that way, even though, in the city and stuff. So it definitely informs a lot of the stuff I write, I think, in a way that, at least when I was doing prose before I was doing comics, it was always about that intersection of the things you hope are true or want to be true, and the kind of nightmarish stuff that usually is true, in some way. And then that's true in the comics, I guess, as well, a lot too,
Let me ask you this. The staffers at Disney, they informed the girl character was Harper Row. Is that her name?
Yeah.
I like that character. I like her little brief appearance in Court of Owls, and it was such a weird kind of like moment where I sat there going, well, I know they're starting a new continuity, but I don't remember this girl, and so maybe this is like just a drop in for a story that I'll tell later. And sure enough, after Court of Owls, you went into that story, and it's a really, really good story, man.
Thanks.
Like,
well,
she's a pretty interesting character.
She's really important to me. Yeah, she actually has a big story, her big issue coming right after this Joker story we're doing again, where you'll learn more about her. But part of the idea is that my what you realize when I was a kid, I mean, I'm sure it's the same. No, it's the same for you. Like, I would go to the Comic Cons here across from Penn Station, and it was just,
oh my God.
In Roosevelt,
it was
the Roosevelt Hotel.
It was the Penta Hotel, the Pennsylvania Hotel, the Roosevelt. They'd gone through a few different ownerships, but I went to that con.
And I would always go just to get like Faust or something that was totally like pornographic.
Tim fucking Vigil, dude. Yeah. So you could see a dude look like Wolverine, gutting motherfuckers, and his wiener was out.
Yeah, and then get cut off.
Yes.
Whatever. So they totally missed out.
Was Faust.
But but there wasn't the same community of fans. And now writing the books and you go to cons, I mean, part of it was like I was always reading comics all the way through, now, but I hadn't been to cons in a long time. And when I started in detective and stuff, and seeing the diversity of the readership and realizing, there aren't a lot of characters that for young women or guys that are gay or a lot of stuff that there are, but there's
not a shit ton of diversity.
Yeah, and so it was kind of like, what, I want to create a character that it doesn't feel forced or contrived, but that is what would be the view of what it's like to live in Gotham from a certain perspective. And so she
particularly if you're living in the lower end of the social.
Yeah, she lives in the narrows.
Scale,
narrows. In the kind of shittier area, and her brother's gay, Colin, and he gets
beat up regularly in the neighborhood. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful issue and a wonderful moment when Batman does the look back over his shoulder.
Yeah, he just looks at her.
Yeah, and just marks the that something is out of the ordinary, and then later on he has a scene with her.
Yeah,
that's quite sweet.
Yeah, it's she's really important to me, and yeah, she'll be coming up in a big way, and I don't know, it really is interesting to see what a different world it is in readership than when I was a kid, and how many more how demographically it's so different, and wonderfully so. I mean, there's so many more women reading comics. Part of me is always like, why the fuck weren't you reading comics? Like when I was a kid,
because I could have gotten laid.
Yeah, I would have been reading Faust, or whatever. Right. But at the same time, no, it's, so in that way, there is that kind of, it moves glacially, like in terms of changing who's in comics. But, I feel like it was something I'm really excited about, like her future and the Bat mythology.
Great character. And that was a wonderful issue, man. I mean, it's tough to be the issue that follows the epic. And you handled it well. And it was great. There's a bunch of different art styles in it, too.
Yeah.
Like there were a couple different artists.
Clunan. Yeah, it was nutty because she's a friend of mine from Vertigo and that kind of stuff. And I asked her if she could draw it, and they said, yeah, why not? And then she started drawing it, and someone mentioned to me, she's like, she's actually the first woman to draw Batman on the title. And it was total
historic.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And so she was all freaking out. She's like, well, I'm not doing it. I was
the
like,
pressure.
No,
Once again, just like you, almost buckle into the pressure.
Yeah.
Man.
So it was a fun issue in that regard, that we didn't mean it to mean what it meant, but it was fun that it did. So,
all right. Now you're in college, you're writing. When do you get out? Do you go publish? When does the Voodoo book go?
Yeah, I went. I was in grad school and I did writing and
at Columbia.
And I wrote a book.
What is that? 2 years?
It was 2 years. Yeah, I met my wife. Started dating a woman that would become.
She was
my
up
wife.
at Columbia.
Yeah, she was actually she was in the medical program there doing research, but she was as part of her scholarship. To pay her way there, she was the secretary at the writing division. So everyone was like, I'm going to ask out that secretary. I'm going to ask her out.
Who's that?
I was like, I'm going to ask her. I know. So I was like, I thought I was all smooth. I was like, hey, I have to register for this again, this poetry class or whatever the fuck. Just keep going back and re-registering. And finally I wore her down and she started, we went out. And I remember the head of the writing program was like, when I told him that we were engaged, he was like, well, it was either that or sue you for fucking sexual harassment. So I was like, so anyway, I went there and I met her and I wrote a book of short stories while I was there, or most of a book. And I was lucky enough coming out that I sent the stories out to different magazines in the literary world, just sent them out to the slush pile. And I started getting into a couple.
What is that? I've never done that. And for those listening, for who are into like writing and stuff, where do you where do you send shit?
Well, it was really hard to kind of know. I mean, the thing that you realize is that they have this collection that comes out every year, Best American Short Stories. And if you look in the back, it tells you where the stories that they picked were published. And what I did was I kind of started to figure out what stories were like mine and the ones I liked, and looked at the magazines they were published in. And then I just sent my stories to those magazines with nothing, just, I hope you like this story, the cover letter.
So blind submission.
I got a lot of rejections. Then I finally got into one called Zoetrope, actually in San Francisco, that I was really excited about. And once you get into one, it tumbles into the next because the people see, oh, you were in this magazine, I'll give you a second read. And so it starts to snowball fast.
How many times did you submit it before you got some love from Zoetrope?
I submitted it maybe 10 or 15 times to different magazines.
When it comes back, you're like, fuck.
Oh, it's like the best. It was the best. Oh, the rejection? Oh, sure. I mean, it stings. It hurts like, terrible. But you got to just build
old woman in a hospital call up and yell
I know, and yell at, right? While she's over dying friend. I'm like, fuck you. You stopped me. It's your fault. But and then I got in, and then I started getting into magazines, and that brings the attention if you're interested in short story writing, which you shouldn't be if you want to be in comics, but it brought the attention of different agents because they read those magazines, and then they come to you and say, I'll represent you and you have a book, and I'll try and sell it to a publisher. Because you can't, if you're interested in short story writing or novel writing, you can't write a novel and send it to a publisher. You need to send it to agents because the publisher won't read it.
Right.
They'll just throw it out. And so you need to find an agent that'll represent it. And you want one because you don't really know how to deal with a publisher. And, you need somebody that knows the mechanics of that. So I got an agent and she sent it out, and I was lucky enough that it got published by Random House, by Dial, this collection called Voodoo Heart. And that's when it came out, and after that I was working on a novel, and this is how I got into comics actually. What happened was the novel that they bought my short story collection and they bought the novel together, and they bought it for like it was back before the 2008 kind of crash, and it was back when books were more flush with money. And I got one of these kind of more obnoxious book deals that was like, oh, if I, it's like, a 6-figure deal and all this stuff. And I was so excited, and I was married, and we were about to have a kid. and we bought a house and all this stuff, and I was so thrilled. What I didn't realize was that they only pay you a tiny bit up front, and everything is based on the acceptance of the book, the novel. So I wrote the short story collection. I had that already. That came out and did fine for them. And then it became, oh, well, where's the book deal? And it was like, well, when you submit the novel that we like, then we'll give you the money for that. So I was like,
so you could have submitted a whole book and then be like, this ain't it.
Well, that's what happened. So what happened?
Really?
So I started writing this book that I had pitched. And as I was writing it, the economy just contracted and became worse. And the book world just changed. And it really became the only way that they would make money back, giving me this obnoxious advance, would be if the book was a bestseller.
Right.
And so it became this horrible relationship, and it's not their fault at all, but it really became like, if this book isn't going to sell well, like huge. And it was about a barnstormer. It wasn't like a big Jerry Bruckheimer thing. It was just about a guy flying around the country, basically. And they became more, let us see every 50 pages, and it kept getting rejected. And there was about 3 years almost, where I was working on this thing, and it got so horrible to go to work every day. I'll never forget. And my wife, we were terrified about losing our house, like everything. We had a kid, and I was tutoring. Then I was trying to make ends meet, so I was like tutoring rich kids in the city, hating it because I was like, these are the kids I went to school with. I can't believe it. I fucking hate it. I was doing that. I was like trying to work at Starbucks and Barnes & Noble on the weekend. It was just a mess. And I was working on this book, and at the time, what happened was, for fun, one of my friends was working on an anthology of literary writers or prose writers make up superhero stories. And he was like, do you want to be in it? And I was like, yes, I do. And my wife was like, you don't have time for that. You got to do this. And I was like, no, I have to do this. I love superheroes. I have to write a superhero. So I did. And I wrote a story called The 13th Egg that was basically about a guy that comes back from the Bikini Atoll test, the nuclear test in the 50s, with these crazy powers, and becomes like a supervillain. And at the time, it caught the attention of editor at Marvel and one at DC, who are actually now married, who were there together on a date.
Who are they?
Jeanine Schaefer of Marvel and Mark Doyle of DC. Mm. And so they came and they had read the story, and they came to the reading for the book. It was like the launch, where we all just went and read a couple stories. And they came up afterwards and they said, we read your story. We liked the story. It seemed serious about superheroes. Well, a lot of them were funny. They were funny stories. So like one, for example, was like about a support group for superheroes that have shitty powers. It was really funny. And like one of the guys, his whole power is he never has to go to the bathroom, and he would just be like, where does it all go? Whatever. And mine was more straight ahead. So they were like, are you serious about comics? And I actually had comics in my backpack at the time. I had like Secret Invasion and all this stuff. And so they asked me, do you want to pitch for some comic stuff? And I was like, yeah, please. And so I pitched for a couple of one-shots at Marvel, and my wife again was like, why are you doing this? You have money waiting for you if you can finish this book. And I was like, you know why? Because it's the only fucking fun I've had at writing in the last 3 years. And I honestly, to be totally honest, I was at home like drinking too much writing. I hated going to work.
You were becoming the cliche of the writer. Yeah.
100%.
But you did something that was for you, something that was...
And made no sense,
And there was no like possible gain from it, just like, hey, this would be fun to do.
And I fell in love with it again. And my wife was sort of like, you know what? You like doing that. You hate doing this. Let's just make it work. We'll take out another loan. Like you will figure it out. Just dissolve the book deal, please. Like tell them you quit.
So and after 3 years of going back and forth, you were just like, look, let's just agree to disagree. And and they were like, okay, bye.
Yeah. Yes. They were really excited to get me off the docket. Yeah, very much. And so I came over and did this, and I'm so grateful to her for that. That she was basically like
the wife.
Yeah. And
what's her name?
Jeannie. She's the best. It's our 10-year anniversary, actually, in a few months.
Get out of here! What are you gonna do? What is the 10-year anniversary?
I owe her
the diamond, the paper, the bat. In this case,
I'll get her the animated series collected. Even though
does she like geek culture?
A little. She's getting into it. She's That
was not where you guys bonded.
No, it wasn't
like,
at all.
She was hot, dude. I don't give a shit what you do about a Batman.
No, she wasn't. She wasn't into it at all. But now she's into it. But. So that was my start in comics. I wrote some stuff for Marvel, and I got the chance to then pitch for DC, and it just sort of went from there. But my
were you a Marvel
really
or
weird.
DC kid growing up as in the parlance of our time?
Well, I mean, I was a Batman kid for DC. I wasn't a DC kid, admittedly, growing up. But The Dark Knight Returns, Year One, The Cult, those books
how old are you?
Shaped my world. 35. 30, I'm 36. I'm going to be 37
36,
in January.
I got you by about 6 years. We read the similar stuff. You were there for the beginning.
I was 10.
Were you there? Did you buy Did you read Dark Knight Returns after
I have
it came
the
out?
four. I have the four at my parents'
Baxter
house.
books?
I have the 4 issues. I have the long
Do you remember buying them?
Oh
Going in
yeah,
and buying them?
100%. In Forbidden Planet, back at the old location on 10th Street and Broadway, when it had the downstairs and the upstairs with the
remember
Godzilla.
that place, yes.
Yeah, and like all the toys and the stuff was downstairs, and 100%. And that book totally reshaped my view of comics. That's to this day my favorite book is Dark Knight Returns and then Year One. But the come of age at that time and then Death in the Family and all that stuff was so transformative, you know.
That was the birth of the modern age, man. That was the stuff that like you felt like for the first time you're like, this shit's grown up, man. Like it was, you know, they marketed. I remember there was an ad in the Rolling Stone magazine, and it was after Batman, the movie, came out, like around the same time. So it was 1989. And it was a drawing of Batman, cowl up, like, you know, maybe it had a piece of the bat. And it kind of looked a little bit like based more on the movie than anything else. But it was an ad for DC Comics and a certain like compilations like Dark Knight Returns, Year One. And it's the headline, and I cut it out and hung on my wall for a long, long time. So, gritty, graphic, grown up.
Oh, it did?
And that was that age, man, where they were just like, we're not, this ain't for the kids anymore. This is for you guys.
And I had no business like looking at it. I was 10 and I remember being like shocked and with the woman with the Nazi symbols.
Yes!
Yeah, and everything, and just being like, it was way over my head. But
and then when you see it, you're like, when you first see it, you're like, man, do I know? Especially because it's so steeped in continuity. You're like, is this some fucking character I never knew about?
Yeah.
And then when you get a little deeper into the world of comics, you're like, no, you just created some chick with fucking schwa stickers on her too. Just to make it difficult for some poor animator 20 years from now who's like, how do we do this? That's what I can't wait to see in that Batman, that Dark Knight Returns Year Two, how they do it. I asked, I was talking to somebody and they told me like, well, Jeff Johns. I was like, what's it look like? And he was like, you know, it's not that. But he's going, you won't be dissatisfied.
It's not that.
It would be a tough sell in a cartoon. Yeah, man, that was, I mean, I hate to sound like an old man, but that was the kind of the golden age of reading Batman, because you had a bunch of new writers. Frank Miller was doing something completely different with the character. Then you had the British invasion as well was going on.
Well, with Batman, it was like the character that grew up with you all of a sudden. You know, for me, it was like, I was right at the age where I thought I was too grown up for some of the stuff happening in some of the Marvel stuff at that time. And then I got those books and it just blew my mind that Batman could be that. Because it is, first you get it and you're like, oh, there's blood and there's tits and there's this and that. But at the end of the day, it was like the characterization, the darkness to the character that he's whispered to by this bat in the cave and shaves his mustache off without realizing it. And the pathos in the opening where he's going to kill himself by racing the car.
This would be a good death.
Oh yeah, exactly. And it was so inspiring because it was so rich in characterization. And despite all the stuff you get because you're 10, it's the blood and whatever, that was the thing that was like, just it bought you another 20 years of comic reading. Just reading that, being like, I could read these forever if there's going to be one more like this, you know, and down the line.
Sir. Yeah, that was that. I don't know if that was the plan, but they hooked our generation or my generation and then slightly below my generation, your generation, by telling stories that were clearly aimed at people who could handle the storytelling more so than kids.
Yeah.
He went from being like the Batman, or Batman, Biff Pow, or Batman and Robin, to being like this haunted fucking outlaw Josie Wales type character, who wore a mask and was nearly infallible. Frank is the one that dialed up his almost godlike abilities and powers, his prescient ability to know everything before it happens, which you do very well in Court of Owls. Like, that's one of my favorite things to play with, and that any writer does, or when I worked in comics too. The Batman in the Bruce Wayne Batman character is the guy who's just not fazed or surprised.
Yeah.
You found a way to phase him and surprise him.
Well, that's the trick with him. It's hard because he's so, he is that way. That's what I actually really loved with Widening Gyre, that idea that can you turn it off? You know what I mean? For a bit, because it feels like he can't. You're in a room with him and he can't stop seeing everything.
Constantly analyzing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he has a conversation in Court of Owls with Dick where, he's talking about like, well, obviously you could check the security camera. And he's like, Dick, you know me better than Alfred. Of course I check the security camera.
Of course I check up on you. Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts.
You can't help but fucking be Batman.
Yeah, and one of the fun things with the Miller stuff too was it was so, to this day, it's so it's such a big footprint, you know, in the way that the thing that's most inspiring to me now, because I feel like when I first started writing Batman, it was really about trying to almost write it like that, you know, because that's probably that and what I've realized is mine is probably a cross between that and the animated series more than anything else, like some strange intersection. But that it was so bold and different in terms of the stories he did, that he was willing to push it to a place that was such a visionary take on it. That to me is a thing that as the guy doing Batman now and sort of looking over some of the other books when they tie into the stuff is always the marching orders, you know, to be like, do the book that is, you only get one chance to write this fucking character, you know, and I always feel like they're going to kick me off after the next one. It's like, you have to do the story, the big story. Because I do get criticized if people are like, oh, you know, you only do these big stories because the Court of Owls is the Black Mirror was 11 issues, the Court of Owls is 11 issues, Joker's, you know, 5, but it's like the backups and the features, and then we're doing a really big story coming up after that. It's 9 issues or 10 issues. And they're like, oh, you know, don't do any like smaller runs, you know. But the feeling is like I'm like, when am I ever going to get to write Batman again? My whole fucking life, like, if I'm going to do it, I want to do everything that you ever wanted to do on the character in the biggest way possible, just and hope that people like it, you know, because they're the stories that you would do if nobody was reading them. And that's to me the lesson of Frank Miller, you know, regardless of what he's become or who he is now or any of that stuff. I mean, you know, I don't try not to sort of look at that stuff at all, but to look at those books and say, this person did something that to this day I can read and say, if I can touch the hem of that in terms of just trying to do something daring, not ever to do something as good as that, but do something as brave as that in my own way, then I've honored the idea of what it means to write Batman. And that's all you try and bring to it, is say, I'm never going to, if I ever spin my wheels on Batman, I will leave. I've said it before, but I mean it. Like, if you hear this, it's the truth. I've said it in like Twitter or whatever, but for me, if I don't have a big story like that to tell, I will leave Gotham happily. I will not stay on the book. I will not stay on the book.
You're never leaving Gotham. It's in your blood, man. You can just hear it.
Well, I was just talking to him. I was like, you know what was funny? I was like watching the other day. I was like watching the animated series stuff again, and he was like, oh, you remember the Over the Edge one, James, the guy that writes the backup. So I was like, oh yeah, that was one of my favorite ones. And I was rewatching like On Leather Wings and all the stuff because I wanted to put some of the stuff in the story I'm doing now as homages to it, with the blimps over the city and everything. Nice.
I saw there was one line in the when he's talking about the building of Wayne Towers, like there's even a mooring for a blimp up top. I was like, he's bringing fucking blimps back to Gotham.
We're gonna bring him in, I promise, in a cool way. But I was and you see that stuff though, and you're like, those guys just they brought it, you know what I mean? Where it was like there wasn't one moment that you see it where you felt like they were ever writing it because that was their job. Right. And the moment it becomes that on Batman is the moment you have to retire and say that's it. You know what I mean? So, but I was watching that and being like, what if it's like him versus Gordon and he goes up again? If you don't come up with ideas that make you call somebody in the middle of the night, it's just like you might as well not do it. And I promise to live by that in the way that, you know, whether or not people like the stories that we're doing, and I know there are people that you know don't like them and stuff like that.
Dude, there are people. I've seen people on the internet say that Quentin Tarantino's a hack. We all know that's fucking not true. So in a world where somebody could say that, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's like, "Fuck your Court of Owls."
Oh yeah, there's a lot, but I mean, at the end of the day, all I could say you can say is that you might hate it, but I promise I'm trying to. You're writing it from a place where it's the most passionate story you could do about the character, and if it might suck, that's fine, but at least you're bringing that. And
you are firing like on all cylinders, and what you know, what you're saying is whether or not people fucking like where it goes, you're not just dialing it in. You're like, look, this is me shooting my fucking wad, and if you don't like my wad, that's fine. Many don't, but I happen to like my wad. A lot of people fucking digging your wad, sir. They got it all over their face, neck, and tits. They love it so much. Let's do real quick your favorite. We talk obviously about Dark Knight Returns. What are the other seminal Batman stuff that as you went into writing? I mean, you've been reading Batman your whole life, but like before you dive into the title, was there stuff where you're like, "Fuck, I want to read this"?
Oh yeah,
like year one. When I go write, I read fucking Dark Knight Returns. I read year one. one of my favorite Batmans or incarnations of Batman is not. I'm not saying it's not the Morrison Batman because I didn't read his the Damian stuff. What I loved was his Justice League Batman incarnation.
New World Order.
Yes, New World Order. The fucking when he fought the Martians, everything that Grant Morrison did with the Justice League before he took off. His Batman characterization when they were going to war with the Injustice Gang, it was corporate takeover.
Too tough.
It's dialed up to like this insane degree where he thinks your thoughts before you think them. It is wonderful. So I always like read that again because I like that Batman. What was the stuff that you read?
I love that story, the Tower of Babel story by Mark Waid. He's like also totally paranoid and badass against the Justice League.
He has the files on everybody.
Right.
So.
Yeah, there's actually a reference to it in the Joker thing we're doing now too. But that and the Killing Joke and a lot of the Denny O'Neil stuff. I have a lot of the big compilations,
the omnibuses and stuff.
And to me, that stuff that I think where our Batman falls is kind of a combination of it. Definitely, we try and go for the stuff that's personal and heavy in terms of the emotional and psychological challenges for Bruce. But it also is we try to be fun and big. And to me, a lot of that stuff kind of hits right in that mark where it's dark and it's gritty, but it's also it still has that kind of stuff from the time before where it is kind of bombastic and crazy. And so
that's helped tremendously by Homie's art, man.
Yeah.
He takes even small moments and makes them kind of larger than life. You realize like, oh man, this is visually fucking interesting.
That's what I mean.
At the same time as even in the intimacy, like there's a lot of intimate scenes in Court Owls where like if you're looking for action, you may not find it. And there's a lot of dialogue in some places where some people just like to see motherfuckers punching each other. But because his artwork balances your words so well, he'll even take something that is a chatty little scene and make it visually interesting and compelling to look at.
Yeah, he's funny because I'm really wordy a lot with it. He's always teasing me about it because he's just like,
artists.
How am I? He's just, you're going to cover my whole page with fucking balloons, aren't you? You know what I mean?
That was Joe Quesada, dude. When I was writing Daredevil, Joe Quesada was like, dude, I'd like to draw the characters. And I was like, go ahead. He's like, I can't. So many fucking words.
I know, right?
Word balloons and shit. But that to me, honestly, that's weird. I mean, let's talk about that real quick. How do you see comics? Like, some people, like, this is always a mystery in my head when I talk to musicians. I said, what comes first, man? Lyrics or music? Do you write the music and then put lyrics on top of it? Or do you write lyrics and then try to find songs to fit the lyrics? And they invariably, these fucking mystical idiots are always like, it's both and nothing at the same, no concrete good fucking answer. When it comes to comics, you word man or picture man?
Well, both for each. Like what happens with me is I definitely
that fucking answer.
Well, no, it's really scene by scene where it's not at all like a mystical thing. It's the scenes that are really emotional and important between the characters in dialogue. I absolutely write the dialogue first and then go back and figure out how many panels it needs and what's going to go back and forth. But for the scenes that are more action oriented, I do the visuals first and then figure out where what the narration and that stuff's going to be. So I try and let the most important part of that script dictate what comes first, I guess, for me personally. Right. So if it's a big action sequence at the beginning of Batman, I do all the visuals first and then go back and put the narration in. And if it's a conversation between him and Dick, I don't lay it out in panels. I lay it out purely in dialogue and then do it and go back. So the first iteration of the script usually looks kind of nutty because it's visuals and then dialogue with nothing and then visuals and then narration. And then I fill it back in that way. So I try and just go for what's the most important thing to me in each scene, in that scene, and write that first. So it's like the visuals are more important than some, the dialogue's more important than others, and then go back and fill in the less important stuff afterwards. To try and give each thing the room it needs, I guess, because it's confining at 20 pages over and over.
Well, 20, yeah, that's right. It used to be 22, and then they kind of scaled it down a little bit.
Snipped us.
What do you like writing the internal dialogue? That's my favorite part.
I love
of Batman.
It. It's like
you can take everything else, man. I just want to write it. I love the idea that this motherfucker, after everything he goes through at the end of the day, sits down like Doogie Howser and sums up, because that's what we're reading. Like a lot of people, like, the Batman internal is essentially him keeping his fucking journals. He's not talking to like you, dear reader. He is talking to whoever eventually reads these books and shit like that. I guess like if he ever has to explain, I remember reading that somewhere. Like he kept journals in case fucking Alfred was called up on the carpet, and he could be like, look, he was the crazy guy. I just fucking helped. But I love writing the internal monologue. Maybe it's the Mickey Spillane of it all or something like that.
Yeah.
But you get to be a tough guy without fucking using expression like, dame and fucking toots or whatever shit. You can be Batman tough and still be eloquent. You can, like, if you read A Court of Owls as the voiceover, the Batman Eternal is describing Gotham, Bruce Wayne's a fucking poet. It's just like, dude, you didn't need to fight crime. You could have just waxed rhapsodically about places. But you could tell, like, you got into writing
Oh, I love it.
Isn't it great?
It is, because he's so unreliable to the people around him too, that it's really different than writing Dick Grayson or the other characters that are so open with the people around them. He's so unreliable where Alfred will be like, "Are you okay, sir?" And he's like, "I'm fine." And that means he's completely a mess inside. So when you get his internal monologue, you're getting the closest thing to what's kind of cutting his nerves raw, each thing. And the story we're doing now is kind of fun, the Joker one, because the Joker has run him so raw. He kidnaps Alfred in the first issue, and you don't know why. Does he know he's Batman or not, and all that stuff. And that it's the first time I've gotten to do his narration where he's just kind of completely raw, and so he's telling you these things that he feels, and it's so odd to do it because it's Bruce, and he usually wouldn't even go that far to himself, and he keeps stopping himself. So he'll be like, "Don't think about Alfred. Don't think about what he might be doing to him. Don't think about." And he's like, "Stop it, Bruce." And because he's a character that's so incredibly closed off from the people around him, even Dick and the ones that he's so close to, that I feel like doing his narration is the one place that you get the thing closest to the bone with Bruce, where it really is like, him better than anyone as the reader. And that relationship you have with him is so special compared to other characters, because he doesn't talk to the people around him the way Superman does, or the way, Hal Jordan does, where they're more open with the people. So you, the reader, have the privilege of hearing what Batman is really thinking and feeling more than anybody else. And there's a thrill to writing that, because you're giving them this insight or this window into a character that nobody in the DC universe has, where they're looking at him being like, "What the fuck is this guy thinking?" You know what I mean?
It's a baffling fucking mystery.
Yeah.
But we, as the readers, are lucky enough to kind of see inside. And what you get to, aside from the mechanics of it, is the actual heart of it too. Like, there's a reason this little boy spent his whole life, has committed his whole life to making sure nobody ever goes through what he went through. And he doesn't speak that out loud all the time. Yeah. Like, he's not sitting there talking to Batgirl going like, "I just don't want any other child to go." He's not a great orator. He keeps it, fine. He's very short spoken and whatnot. So you're right. When you get into the internal monologues, that's where you actually get to see his head and heart and kind of remember why we're there.
The thing with his internal monologue is that it really is the one place that readers get to see the things that are happening in his head. And the fun thing about that is that all the characters around him, the whole Justice League, doesn't see that. I feel like they all look at Batman and find him this completely inscrutable motherfucker. Or they look at him and they're like, "What is this guy thinking?" And it's great, because you look at him and I feel like he stands next to these gods in the Justice League, and all of them have superpowers except for him. And yet they all look at him and they're like, "What is this guy thinking?" But as the reader, you have the privilege of getting to hear his thoughts and getting to hear sort of what goes on in Bruce Wayne's mind. And in that way, writing it is this endless thrill. I every time you write, the Batcave, panel 1, the Batcave, Bruce comes roaring in through the falls, and he's like, "Alfred, get the whatever it is." It really is a huge privilege to get to write the character, and especially to do the internal monologue, where you feel like you're getting to kind of explore the heart of this character that's meant so much to you. As corny as it sounds, it really does. It's the best job
on this
world.
Fucking show, dude. There ain't nothing corny about loving on Batman. That's for sure. You got a deal with DC exclusive. You just work with those cats now, correct?
Yeah, I'm with them. Yeah, for another about a year and a half, and we have this. We're doing this Joker story, me and Greg, and it goes until February with a big finale. This kind of horrifying finale, and then everyone thinks, by the way, I'm going to kill Alfred. So I get these incredibly angry tweets all the time about it, and Facebook messages and pictures of people holding pictures of Alfred and all this stuff. They think I'm going to completely off him. So
you know what I like in the backup story, the Alfred Jarvis Pennyworth?
Yeah, his father.
That was neat. I mean, again, like, it's tough to add fucking a new spoke without pissing off an old time fan. and not only am I an old time fan, but I'm also like, I've written the character and stuff. So there, it's tough to introduce new information into the Matrix. Like I remember, I'd written Cacophony and Winding Gyre, and I remember reading somebody go, Kevin Smith has fallen prey to the oldest fucking trope of writing Batman in the book, that if you introduce a new character, he beats Batman. They're like, that's what every new writer does. They create a fucking character and he comes in and handily beats Batman. How dare they do this sort of thing and whatnot. And you, as a fan, you sit there and go like, fuck, man. Like, I would, if I wasn't writing it, I would be one of those chorus of voices going, you fucked up or something like that. But you're able to, and what you've done with not just Court of Owls, but the backup stories, which are really interesting. If people are passing them over, because some cats are like, oh, it takes place not now, and just fucking skip. Like when you read Watchmen, some people skip the fucking, the pirate shit. Don't skip it. It's good stuff because it's adding to the continuity, the Wayne continuity and Alfred's continuity, which could always kind of use it. But lead me through it real quick. Jarvis Pennyworth worked for Thomas and Martha, knew a 3-year-old Bruce Wayne.
Yes.
So Bruce has no real memory of them.
He has no real memory of them, no.
Are you going to continue the backstories?
Yeah, well, the fun thing is I'm actually here with my buddy James. He was a writing student of mine actually a long time ago, and he and I are doing the backups together on Batman all the way through next year. And the fun is what we're trying to do is use the backups to be like the pieces you didn't see of the main story and secret things. So we're doing that all the way through the next big story we're doing. So it should be fun. So
you're going to show Alfred coming to work for the Waynes in place of his dad and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, you're going to see things like that coming up in the story we're going to do.
See, this is why everyone thinks you're killing Alfred, because they're like, he's doing an awful lot of Alfred biography.
I know. A lot, and there's always these touching moments for Alfred. Yeah. I'll always love you, Master Bruce.
They're like, you prick, we see it coming.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, I'll be right back after this pot of tea. Like, you always think he's dead. But it's I love Alfred. So everyone out there and
relax, people.
Yes, relax.
But those backup stories are good.
But he might die.
You are going to show him. Wait, what was that last bit?
Nothing.
You are going to show. So you're going to show like him first getting that. Like I found myself really wrapped up in the backstories, man. Where thanks. I was just like, oh shit, I wonder where Alfred fits into this, and blah blah blah. And then as he's imploring his son, please never come. I mean, the bittersweet poignancy of like a father writing to, probably the second biggest figure, well, the third biggest, Batman, Joker, Alfred probably be next, and telling his young son, don't
ever
come to this cursed city, or particularly to the Waynes. It's nice. It's nice. We all know eventually Alfred can't escape his fate.
Well, that's part of it for Gotham, I feel like, at the end of the day, and we are going to explore this idea, and you are going to see a lot more about early Alfred and early Bruce and some of the stuff we're going to do soon, but is that Gotham is the city that will generate these terrible nightmares for whoever is the hero, there. But if you can survive that, you come out the best hero ever, meaning it does it out of love. I feel like it's a trial by fire in Gotham. And so even though Jarvis is kind of like, don't come here, it's a terrible place, by coming there and being who he is, Alfred, and what Bruce does, it makes you the hero that can stand next to the Justice League and they all look to you for answers. You know what I mean? That's why Gotham is the best place on earth, because it is a totally fucked up city that's like, if you live here, it's going to suck, for you. But if you survive what we throw at you, you will be the best. And
if you can make it here, you'll make it anywhere.
Yeah, you're the best. And that's what the Joker is saying in the story we're doing now, where he's kind of like, you've lost your edge because you rely on these fools like Nightwing and all these people. And your pure Gotham is us, is your royal court. And you should be in the top, the castle of Gotham, and we should be your court. And in doing that, that's the way you become your purest hero, is you face us all the time. You don't lay back and pretend you're whoever you are with these idiots that are human. So in that way, I feel like Gotham is this horrifying place to everybody from Jarvis to Alfred. And you're always like, why do they live there? I always feel like, why do they live there?
Like, right? Leave, bitches, go!
I know, but I think that's what it is at the end of the day, that if you can, and it comes from personal place. You all have struggles, with your own issues. And I have my own, and that feeling of, if you can face those things or your own demons and your own fears, and you come out the other side of it, no matter how bad it gets for you, whether you do depression or anything, anxiety or whatever, you come out the other side of that stuff, you come out stronger. And that's what Gotham does. And that's why they stay, because they know, I get through this, I'll come out burned down to the purest, better version of myself than when I came to the city. And in that way, I really feel like that's what Gotham does, and that's why it's a great place, to live.
Scott Snyder has done more thinking about Batman and Gotham, and I consider myself a fan, but certainly more than I've put into it, man, and eloquently as well. All that fucking education, creative writing paid off, my friend. Everyone was right, dude. It's very rare when fucking the majority steers you to something that you're like, yeah, I do like that. Normally they steer you to crap. In this case, man, the majority was absolutely right. You're doing wonderful work over there, the Lord's work. God willing, you don't leave the title anytime too soon. Clearly, you love it. Hopefully, they're paying you a king's ransom and whatnot because you deserve it. But what got you there in the first place is that sense of adventure of like, you know what, I'm going to write this fucking thing that's not the fucking thing I'm supposed to do, but I want to do it. And just by following your dopey heart, you wound up in a catbird seat, man.
Well, thanks.
You're steering the fucking ship, the good ship, Batman, and doing a fantastic fucking job.
That means a lot to hear from you. I appreciate it. I really am.
It's good stuff, dude. It's really good stuff. I mean, believe me, like, I'm a writer too, and I'm a longtime fan, and I would love to be able to be like, here are the holes. There are no holes. Like, you love when you see a seaworthy fucking vessel where you're like, wow, he fucking covered his ass. This is fucking smart. Everything fucking goes. Even like, look, there are moments in the Batman story where, without spoiling things, death for some doesn't come very easily. Mm-hmm. And that's not, with Batman stories, I like my shit very real world and whatnot, but you found a way to balance that where at the end of it, I wasn't like, oh, it's fucking supernatural. It's not supernatural. It's scientific.
Thanks.
I like that so much in a way that I didn't imagine I would, but it's also just made sense, dude. Like the owl being the opposite of a bat, kind of a predatory on a bat. Was really quite poetic. And I talked about it before, but I love the fact that you followed an epic. You know what it reminded me of? The next issue after Court of Owls, the issue about Harper Row.
Yeah, that's right.
It reminded me of, you watch The Wire.
Oh, that's my favorite show.
Okay. You watch The Wire. Season 1 and 2, you need to see because season 3 is some of the best television ever fucking produced. And at the end of season 3, you're like, who could ever, fucking chuck it out because you can never make anything that good. And what they do in season 4 is tell a story that you can't imagine you're going to like nearly as much. You're like, are you kidding me? Last season was fucking drug dealers fighting each other and shit like that. Stringer Bell and whatnot. Bell. And suddenly they do an about face and tell you a story about kids
in the school.
And somehow that season of The Wire is as good, if not better than fucking season 3. They were gifted. That's what you did with that issue. You follow up. Court of Owls was a strong work where you're like, fucking, he should take a year off. He just did 11 chapters of an epic. And you were able to follow it up with an issue that's just like, well, this ain't Court of Owls. And it was beautiful. It was really, there's touching moments in that fucking book. Her talking about the 7 words and all that stuff, but just the look back over the shoulder and just sometimes it's nice. Like I liked some of the other titles DC used to do back in the day where they do stories about the Batman universe, but not about Batman. If you can do that, if you can keep a Batman audience's fancy while you're telling pages of pages without fucking the main character, you're a gifted fucking writer. And I fell in love instantly. I was just like, I like this family. I like this girl. I liked her little appearance, man. And then when you read the whole issue, you're like, oh, I like her even more. So I look forward to see where that character is going. But just as a writer, man, kudos. You did a really nice fucking about face.
Thanks.
Right after you were done with your grand epic and shit. And it's just as strong and sturdy. It reminds me of the about face that the Wire did. And you've seen the show, so you know that's fucking
Thanks,
high
man.
praise.
I mean, it really means a lot. I appreciate it.
It's been awesome to sit down and fucking talk to you, man. We'll have you back on.
I'd love to,
unfortunately,
anytime.
He's on the other side of the country from where I am. But when I'm out here, and if you're ever out there, we'll kick back and fucking do it again. Because as per usual, time just flew.
Yeah,
but you had great shit to say, dude, about the writing of Batman, about shit that like. We haven't had too many comics people. It's been a very animated series, kind of heavy. So to hear from somebody who's like currently writing Batman and the way you spoke about it so wonderfully and so eloquently and inspiringly, hopefully there are cats out there listening going like, shit, I'm going to write fucking a superhero story, a Batman story. If not for the public, just for your fucking self, because practice makes perfect. Yeah. But to hear you talk about it, man, we all know that the Cal's in very fucking capable hands. Excellent fucking job. And great job on the fucking show.
Thanks. That means a lot. I really appreciate it.
Tremendous. You've been listening to Me and Scott Snyder, the author of the current run of Batman. It's up to what, issue 13, 14 right now? 15
yeah,
or something
14
like
right now, yeah.
You can check out the book was called Voodoo. I always lose the second word. Heart. You keep pointing to your chest and I wouldn't remember. Voodoo Heart. But right now, man, he is the man of the moment in comics, and with good fucking reason. Everybody was right in saying, like, get him on the show. I was just glad, aside from like having a fucking show full of somebody who loves the character, and that's what the show's about. It forced me to read something where I was like, when you start writing, I don't know if this is the same with you. When you start writing, your head goes up your own ass, and you're like, I can't read anything. I'm busy creating a universe and shit. So it was nice. I've been in a real creative zone for a little while now, but it was nice to kick back and read something. Like, I'll find myself rereading old shit, because like I know where it's going, and that also juices me up, like inspires me. But to try on the new, I'm like, I'm too busy doing my thing. So it was lovely to be urged by so many people, like, get him on the show, knowing you're be on the show, going like, well, I got to fucking read the dude's work and shit. And then find that like, oh, this is great. Like, now I'm a reader. Now I'll be like, I had all those issues lined up, and now I'll be able to kind of read on the monthly, which is going to be fiercely irritating because I just came in one full swoop and got to read everything as one big meal. Now I'm going to be back to fucking monthlies like everybody else, but that's cool. There's something joyful about that as well.
Thanks again. I really can't tell you enough what a big fan I am of the show and everything. So it means a lot for you.
It has been excellent fucking having you on, man. Next week in the Fat Cave, man, somebody who's got some high bar to climb after this show. But until then, man, this is Kevin Smith. Saying thank you for kicking back and listening to me and Scott Snyder talking here. And we'll be back next week. Same fat time, same fat channel. Smodcast.com.
This has been a production of Smodco Internet Radio. Sir, only at smodcast.com. Smodco Internet Radio broadcasts the free funny, but you can broadcast your Smodco love with merchandise. Shirts, posters, comics, memorabilia, and more. JayandSilentBob.com is your hub for comic book men, Secret Stash, and Kevin Smith's cinematic catalog. It's an online one-stop shop that fulfills your need, minus the weed. JayandSilentBob.com. Bookmark it, baby. So, you're saying,
yo, third dude, I just got paid, and I want to get laid.
Might your humble narrator suggest a live Smodco show? See Smod.com list all the upcoming performances, with links to tickets. As for getting laid, that's all on you, amigo. We just make you laugh till you shit your pants. The Smonsters of Talk could be coming to your town. Go to csmod.com and find out.